I'll never forget the moment I realized loving Thatcher Holloway would cost me everything. I was standing in a cathedral, 7 months pregnant with his child, watching him marry another woman, and it was my idea. The organ music swelled around me as I pressed myself against the cold stone wall at the back of the church, one hand on my swollen belly, the other covering my mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. Through the blur of tears, I watched him stand at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking like every woman's dream. But he wasn't mine anymore. He couldn't be. Have you ever loved someone so much you destroyed your own happiness to save theirs? Have you ever made a choice so selfless it broke you into pieces you knew could never be put back together? That's what real love looks like sometimes. Not the fairy tale they sell you in romance novels. Not the happily ever after. The sacrifice. The kind that leaves scars no one else can see. They say money can't buy happiness. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes money can steal it right out from under you. $1 billion inheritance. A grandmother's ironclad will, an impossible deadline that gave Thatcher exactly 6 months to find a wife, the right kind of wife, old money, blue blood, someone from his world, and me? I was a nurse from the wrong side of town, wearing scrubs that still smelled like disinfectant from my double shift, carrying a secret that could destroy everything he'd worked for his entire life. The pregnancy test sat on my bathroom counter for 3 days before I could bring myself to tell him. 3 days of staring at those 2 pink lines, knowing they represented an impossible choice. 3 days of understanding that love, real love, sometimes means letting go. When I finally told Thatcher about the baby, I watched his face cycle through shock, joy, terror, and then something that looked like grief. He pulled me close, buried his face in my hair and whispered, "We'll figure this out. I promise. I'm not losing you." But we both knew the truth. His grandmother's will was explicit. Marry someone from an approved family within 6 months, or the entire Holloway empire, 3 generations of wealth, hundreds of employees, his family's legacy, would be dissolved and donated to charity. She'd controlled him his whole life, and even from the grave, her grip remained absolute. "I don't care about the money," he said that night, his hand on my stomach where our child was growing. "We'll start over, just us." I believed him. I really did. But I also knew what it would do to him. Watching everything his father and grandfather built crumble because he fell in love with the wrong woman. The guilt would poison us eventually. The resentment would creep in during every hardship, every struggle, every moment when our child asked why they couldn't have what other kids had. So I made a decision. A terrible, necessary, completely devastating decision. This is the story of how I disappeared with Thatcher Holloway's child. How I watched the only man I've ever loved pledge his life to someone else while I stood hidden in the shadows, feeling our baby kick against my ribs. How I walked out of that cathedral and drove straight to the airport with a one-way ticket to a town where no one knew my name. And how 5 years later, a chance encounter in a grocery store would shatter every carefully constructed lie I'd built to protect us. But before I tell you about the ending, you need to understand the beginning. You need to know how a summer night volunteering at a charity gala changed my entire life. How a man in a tuxedo asked me to dance when I was clearing champagne glasses from empty tables. How 3 months of stolen moments and secret meetings made me believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be enough. You need to know about the pregnancy, the ultimatum, the choice I made that still haunts me every single day. Most of all, you need to understand why I did it. Why I convinced Thatcher that I'd lost the baby. Why I stood in that cathedral watching him marry Victoria Ashford Kent, a woman whose last name opened doors mine would forever keep closed. Why I let him believe our child was gone when she was very much alive, growing inside me, completely unaware that her father thought she'd never existed. Because that's what love is sometimes. Not the grand gestures, not the passionate declarations. Sometimes love is signing away your own happiness so the person you cherish can have the future they deserve. Sometimes it's carrying a secret so heavy it crushes you, just so they can breathe easier. If you've ever had to choose between your heart and doing the right thing, you're going to want to hear this story. Hit that subscribe button, because what comes next will leave you speechless. And drop a comment. Tell me, would you have done what I did? Could you have walked away from the love of your life to save them from themselves? Let's get into it. The hospital was quietest at 2:47 in the morning. That's when I first saw him cry. I'd been working the graveyard shift at County General for 3 years by then, long enough to recognize the different types of visitors we got in the cardiac wing. There were the frantic ones, fresh from emergency calls, still wearing yesterday's clothes. The exhausted ones who'd been keeping vigil for days, propped up in uncomfortable chairs with cold coffee. And then there were the ones like him, the ones trying to hold everything together while their world crumbled around them. Thatcher Holloway sat beside his grandmother's bed like a statue carved from grief. His suit probably cost more than I made in a month, but it was wrinkled now, the tie loosened, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He'd been there for 16 hours straight. I knew because I'd started my shift at 11, and he'd already been there then, according to the day nurse's notes. "Mr. Holloway?" I knocked softly on the doorframe, even though the door was open. "I need to check her vitals." He looked up, and that's when I noticed his eyes. One green, one hazel. The kind of detail that makes you stop and stare, even when you know you shouldn't. Even in the harsh overhead lights, even with exhaustion written across every line of his face, those mismatched eyes were striking. "Of course." His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in hours. He stood, moving away from the bed to give me space, but his hand lingered on his grandmother's for just a moment longer. Vivian Holloway's chart told me everything I needed to know medically. Congestive heart failure, advanced stage, fluid building in her lungs, despite the medications we were pumping into her. Kidneys starting to struggle. Her body was shutting down, piece by piece. The cruel kind of slow that gives you just enough hope to make the inevitable worse. But charts don't tell you about the woman herself. They don't mention the way her silver hair was still perfectly styled, even in a hospital bed, or how her nightgown looked like it cost more than my car, or the antique ring on her finger that caught the light every time her chest rose and fell with labored breathing. "How is she?" Thatcher asked, as I recorded her blood pressure. It had dropped since the last check. I could have lied, could have given him some comforting platitude about her being stable, but something about the way he looked at me, direct, unflinching, like he could handle the truth, made me honest. "Her numbers aren't great," I said carefully, adjusting the IV drip. "But she's not in pain. The medication is keeping her comfortable." He nodded, jaw tight, and returned to his chair. That's when I noticed the laptop on the side table, papers spread across every available surface. He wasn't just sitting here, he was working. "Board meeting at 8, he said, catching my glance. "Conference call at 10. I can do them from here. You don't have to explain yourself to me." "I'm not leaving her." The words came out sharp, defensive, like someone had already suggested he should. I should have left then, should have finished my rounds and moved on to the next patient, but something made me pause at the door. "The cafeteria coffee is terrible," I said, "but there's a decent pot in the nurse's station. I could bring you some." He looked up, surprised. "You don't have to do that." "I know." 20 minutes later, I came back with 2 cups. I told myself it was because I needed coffee anyway, that it just made sense to bring him one too. But the truth was, something about the way he sat there, this man in his expensive suit, trying so hard to be strong, reminded me of myself 3 years ago. "My mother died in a hospital like this," I said, settling into the chair beside him. It was unprofessional. I knew that, but it was 3 in the morning, and sometimes professionalism matters less than connection. That's why I became a nurse. Sounds cliché, right? No. Thatcher wrapped his hands around the cup, savoring the warmth. It sounds like love. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor, the distant sound of a call button down the hall, the quiet hum of medical equipment keeping Vivienne alive. "She raised me," he said finally. "After my parents died, plane crash when I was 12. She put her entire life on pause to make sure I had a home. That's what love looks like." He turned those mismatched eyes on me again, and something shifted in the air between us. Something I definitely shouldn't have been feeling for a patient's family member. "I don't even know your name," he said. "Evangeline!" I stood up, suddenly aware of how close we were sitting. "And you need to get some rest. She's stable for now. I'll be checking on her every hour." But he didn't rest. And when I came back an hour later to check Vivian's vitals, he was still awake, still working, papers now organized into neat piles. "You're persistent," I said. "So are you." He gestured to the coffee cup I was carrying. "Is one of those for me?" That's how it started, the coffee ritual. Every night I worked, every night he was there, which was every night as far as I could tell, I'd bring 2 cups. We'd sit in that uncomfortable chair together, talking in hushed voices while his grandmother slept. He told me about the company he ran, though he never made it sound impressive. Just talked about it like it was a responsibility, something he'd inherited along with those eyes and the weight of his family name. I told him about my shifts, about the patients I couldn't save, about the ones I could. On the 4th night, during my break, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I pulled out my phone and Googled, "Who is Thatcher Holloway?" The results made my stomach drop. Billionaire, CEO of Holloway Industries, one of the country's most eligible bachelors, according to some Society magazine. There were photos of him at galas, at charity events, always in a perfect tuxedo with a different beautiful woman on his arm. And there I was, in my scrubs that smelled like disinfectant and cheap coffee, thinking we'd been having some kind of connection. The next night, I almost didn't bring him coffee, almost kept things strictly professional the way I should have from the beginning. But when I walked past Vivian's room and saw him there, tie completely gone now, head in his hands, shoulders shaking, I couldn't stop myself. "Hey!" I set the coffee down and put my hand on his shoulder. "What happened?" "She coded 20 minutes ago." His voice cracked. "They got her back, but the doctor said, he said it's time to start thinking about hospice, about making her comfortable." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. Hospice meant giving up. Hospice meant accepting that medicine had done all it could. "I'm so sorry." He looked up at me then, and I saw it clearly for the first time. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, not the man from the Google results. Just a person, broken and scared, about to lose the only parent he had left. "I don't know how to let her go," he whispered. I sat down beside him, our knees touching in the cramped space beside the hospital bed. "You don't have to know how. You just have to be here. That's all she needs." Vivian stirred then, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, they focused on us, on Thatcher and me, sitting close, my hand still on his shoulder. And despite the oxygen mask, despite the tubes and wires and machines keeping her alive, I could have sworn I saw her smile. "Good," she whispered, so quiet I almost missed it. "That's good." The moment felt suspended in time, this strange intersection of grief and something else, something I didn't have a name for yet. Thatcher's hand found mine, his fingers threading through mine like they belonged there. Outside that hospital room, we were from different worlds. Inside it, we were just 2 people trying to hold on while everything fell apart. And somehow, that was enough. 3 weeks into Vivian's hospital stay, something unexpected happened. She woke up lucid, not just awake, actually clear-eyed and sharp, more present than she'd been since her admission. The doctors called it a rally, that phenomenon where dying patients suddenly improve right before the end, like the body gathering all its remaining strength for one final performance. I was adjusting her pillows when she caught my wrist with surprising strength. "Are you single, dear?" I nearly dropped the water pitcher. "I'm sorry, what?" Simple question. Her voice was weak but firm, those shrewd eyes studying my face. "Are you single?" "Mrs. Holloway, I don't think—" "Do you find my grandson handsome?" Heat flooded my cheeks. Thatcher was in the bathroom, thank God, but he could come back any second. That's not really appropriate. "Oh, nonsense. I'm dying. I can ask whatever I want." She squeezed my wrist. "You're good for him. I've seen how he looks at you, how you look at him. I bring him coffee sometimes." "My dear girl, no one looks at someone that way over coffee." She smiled, and for just a moment, I could see what she must have been like in her prime. Beautiful, sharp, someone who always got what she wanted. He needs someone real, someone who isn't after the money or the name. The bathroom door opened. Thatcher emerged, stopping short when he saw us. "Everything okay?" "I was just asking Evangeline about her intentions toward you," Vivian said cheerfully. His face went crimson. "Grandmother." "What?" "I'm simply making conversation." 2 days later, they moved Vivienne to hospice care at the Holay estate. I wasn't supposed to be involved anymore. She wasn't my patient once she left the hospital, but she'd asked for me specifically, and somehow Thatcher had arranged for me to be part of her home care team. My first glimpse of the estate made me understand just how different our worlds were. I pulled my beat-up Honda Civic through gates that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years, down a driveway lined with ancient oaks, to a house that looked like it belonged in a museum. Not a house, a mansion. The kind of place that had a name instead of just an address. "You came." Thatcher met me at the door, relief written across his face. He looked different here. Less rumpled, but somehow more tired. The weight of the house seemed to press down on him. "She asked for me," I said. I wasn't going to say no. He led me through rooms filled with antiques and oil paintings, each one probably worth more than my student loans. My footsteps echoed on marble floors. Everything was beautiful and cold and perfect, like a museum exhibit labeled "How Rich People Live." Vivian's room was different, warm. They'd brought in her favorite furniture, her photographs, her books, made the hospice bed look less clinical with soft blankets and fresh flowers. But it was still a deathbed, no matter how you dressed it up. "There you are." Vivian's face lit up when she saw me. "I was beginning to think you'd come to your senses and stayed away." "Not that lucky," I said, falling into the easy banter we'd developed. "Good. I have so much to tell you about Thatcher. Did you know he donated all his birthday money to animal shelters when he was 7? Every single year until he was 16. "Grandmother," Thatcher groaned. "What?" "She should know what kind of man you are." It became my routine. County General during the day, Holay estate in the evening. My colleagues thought I was crazy, working essentially 2 jobs. But Vivian paid well, embarrassingly well. And besides, it wasn't really about the money. It was about the way Thatcher's shoulders relaxed when I walked into the room. The way Vivian would save stories for when I arrived. The way I'd started to feel like maybe, impossibly, I belonged in this world of marble and antiques and old money. 3 weeks into the hospice arrangement, Thatcher walked me to my car. It was late, past midnight. Vivian had finally fallen asleep after a difficult evening. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. I know this isn't what you signed up for." "She's easy to love," I said, then immediately wanted to take it back. Too familiar, too much. But Thatcher stepped closer. "So are you." The kiss happened so fast I didn't have time to think about whether it was a good idea. His hands cupped my face, gentle and desperate, all at once. He tasted like the coffee I'd brought him earlier, and something else, grief and hope mixed together. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. "I'm sorry," he started, but I cut him off. "Don't be. I'm going to lose her," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "Soon. Maybe days, maybe weeks, but soon." I took his hand, threading my fingers through his. "I know, but not tonight." After that night, everything changed. We didn't hide it from Vivian. Couldn't, really. She was too sharp, even in her diminished state. "Finally," she said, when she caught us holding hands beside her bed. I was beginning to think I'd have to orchestrate something more dramatic. "You orchestrated this?" Thatcher asked. "Oh, darling, why do you think I requested Evangeline specifically for my home care?" She smiled. "I might be dying, but I'm not dead yet. I can still recognize a perfect match when I see one." The days blurred together. I'd arrive after my hospital shift, still smelling like disinfectant, and Thatcher would be there with food he'd ordered from some restaurant I'd never heard of. We'd eat dinner beside Vivian's bed, and she'd tell us stories about young Thatcher, how he'd punched a boy twice his size for bullying someone smaller, How he'd cried for days after his parents' plane went down, refusing to believe they weren't coming back until Vivian sat him down and told him crying was the only honest thing to do. How he'd thrown himself into learning everything about the family business because it was the only way he knew to honor them. "He's a good man," Vivian would say, sometimes to me, sometimes to the air. "The best I know." But sometimes, when Thatcher left the room, she'd get this look, worried, almost frightened. "What is it?" I asked one evening. "He's going to need you more than he knows," she whispered. "What's coming?" She trailed off, her eyes distant. "What's coming? Mrs. Holay, what do you mean?" But she drifted off again, leaving me with a cold feeling in my stomach I couldn't explain. Vivian held on longer than anyone expected. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. Autumn came to the estate gardens, turning everything to fire. Reds and golds and oranges that blazed against the grey stone of the house. She was weaker now, sleeping more than she was awake. But in her lucid moments, she'd make sure we were both there, holding court from her bed like a queen. "Promise me something," she said one October afternoon. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Both Thatcher and I leaned in close to hear. "Anything," Thatcher said. "Promise me you'll remember he's a good man." She was looking at me now, her grip surprisingly strong on my hand. "Whatever happens, whatever comes, remember that." "I will," I promised, confused. "Of course I will. You don't understand yet." Her eyes filled with tears. "But you will, and when you do, choose love. Always choose love." Thatcher and I exchanged glances. He looked as confused as I felt. "What's going to happen?" I asked, but Vivienne had already closed her eyes, the moment of clarity passing like a cloud across the sun. That night, I told Thatcher about the cryptic warnings. "She's been saying things like that more often," he admitted. "The medication makes her confused sometimes. I don't think it means anything." But it felt like something, like a storm building on the horizon that I couldn't quite see yet. My life became split in 2. County General by day, understaffed, underfunded, reeking of bleach and desperation. The Holay estate by night, quiet and elegant, smelling of fresh flowers and old money. The contrast was jarring. At the hospital, I'd hold the hand of a patient who couldn't afford their medications, who'd waited until things were critical because they didn't have insurance. Then, I'd drive to a house where a single painting on the wall could probably fund that patient's treatment for life. Thatcher never made me feel less than, never made me feel like I didn't belong, but I couldn't shake the awareness of it. The vast gulf between us that felt wider every time I pulled my Honda up beside his Mercedes. Still, we fell deeper. It was impossible not to, spending every evening together, watching someone we both loved slowly slip away. Grief has a way of stripping everything down to what's essential, and what was essential was this: we loved each other. We never said it out loud, didn't need to. It was in every glance, every touch, every quiet moment stolen between caring for Vivian. The gardens were ablaze now, peak autumn, the kind of beauty that hurts because you know it's fleeting. Vivian could see them from her window, and sometimes she'd just stare out at the colors, a small smile on her face. She loved this time of year, Thatcher said one evening. We were sitting on the terrace while Vivian slept. She used to throw these elaborate garden parties in October. Hundreds of people, champagne, live music. Sounds magical. It was. He pulled me closer. "I'll show you. Next year, we'll bring it back." Next year felt like both a promise and a lie. When Vivian was awake, she told stories, not just about Thatcher anymore, but about the whole family. About his great-grandfather who'd built the Holay fortune from nothing. About his grandmother who'd fought to keep women's voices heard in boardrooms when no one wanted to listen. About his parents, brilliant and restless, who died doing what they loved. They were flying to a medical conference, she said one evening, her voice thin as paper. Your father was giving a keynote speech. Your mother just wanted the adventure. She looked at Thatcher. They would be so proud of you. I'm not sure about that. I am. She reached for both our hands. You know what made them special? They chose love over expectation. Your mother wasn't from our world. Did you know that? I felt Thatcher stiffen beside me. No, he said carefully. You never mentioned that. Because your father's parents didn't approve. They came around eventually, but not before making things very difficult. Vivian's eyes found mine. Love isn't always convenient. It doesn't always make sense on paper, but it's the only thing that matters in the end. After she fell asleep, I asked Thatcher, "Did you really not know?" She never talked about it. My grandparents were already gone when I was born. I just assumed. He ran his hands through his hair. Why would she tell us that now? That cold feeling in my stomach intensified. I don't know. November came with frost and shorter days. Vivienne was sleeping 20 hours out of every 24 now. Her breathing was labored, even with oxygen. The hospice nurse said it could be any day. I'd started keeping clothes at the estate because leaving felt wrong. Thatcher and I took turns sitting with her through the nights, making sure she was never alone. During one of my shifts, while Thatcher slept in the next room, Vivian's eyes opened. For a moment, they were completely clear. "Evangeline, I'm here." I took her hand. "You need to know something." She struggled to sit up. I helped her, adjusting her pillows. "About the will, about what I've done. You should rest. There's no time." She gripped my hand with surprising strength. I thought I was protecting him. I thought I knew what was best, but I was wrong. I was so wrong. "Mrs. Holloway, you're not making sense. Promise me." Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. "Promise me you'll fight for him. When he tries to push you away, and he will, you'll fight." Why would he push me away? But she was fading again, her eyes losing focus. "Choose love," she whispered. "Even when it costs everything, choose love." Vivian Holloway died on a Thursday in November, with both of us holding her hands. The end came quietly. No dramatic final words, no last-minute revelations. Just her breathing growing slower, and then stopping altogether. The hospice nurse checked her pulse, checked her pupils, and noted the time. 4:27 in the afternoon. Thatcher didn't cry. He just sat there, still holding her hand, staring at her face like he could will her back to life through sheer force of love. "She's gone," I said softly. "I know." His voice was hollow. I need a minute." I gave him an hour, sat beside him in silence while the nurse made calls, while people started arriving. The funeral director, Vivienne's lawyer, staff from the house. They all moved around us like water flowing around stones, giving us space to grieve. "She told me to choose love," Thatcher said finally. Right before she lost consciousness for the last time, she said, "Choose love. Always choose love." She told me the same thing. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in his expression made my heart stutter. "What do you think she meant?" "I think she meant us." He pulled me close, burying his face in my hair. I felt his body shake with silent sobs, and I held him while he finally let himself break. We stayed like that for a long time, while the November sun set outside and the estate staff moved quietly through the halls, preparing for what came next. I thought the hardest part was over. I thought we'd weathered the worst of it together. I had no idea that Vivian's death was just the beginning. The funeral was massive. I'd never seen so many people in one place. Politicians, philanthropists, society names I recognized from headlines, but never thought I'd encounter in person. The cathedral was Gothic and gorgeous, all soaring ceilings and stained glass that threw colored light across the pews. I stood in the back, feeling acutely aware of my simple black dress from Target, my hair that I'd tried and failed to style like the other women there, my complete and total lack of belonging. "What are you doing back here?" Thatcher appeared beside me, eyes red but dry. He'd been greeting people at the entrance, accepting condolences with the grace of someone born to it. "I thought I don't belong up front." His jaw tightened. "Yes, you do. Thatcher, look around. Everyone here is important to my grandmother because you were, more than most of these people." He took my hand, not caring who saw. "You're sitting with me." So I walked down that aisle with him, feeling hundreds of eyes on us. whispers following in our wake. He sat me in the front pew, beside people in designer mourning clothes and family heirlooms, and held my hand through the entire service. The priest talked about Vivienne's life, her charity work, her devotion to family. People gave eulogies, business partners, old friends, distant relatives. They painted a picture of someone impressive and intimidating, someone who'd commanded respect everywhere she went. But they didn't talk about the woman who'd asked me if I found her grandson handsome, who'd schemed to bring us together, who'd held my hand and begged me to choose love. At the reception, I met Prescott Holay for the first time. He was Thatcher's cousin, maybe 10 years older, with the same build but none of the warmth. Everything about him screamed entitlement, from his perfectly tailored suit to the way he looked at people, like they were pieces on a chessboard. "So, you're the nurse?" He appeared beside me while I was attempting to navigate the receiving line. "How novel." "Evangeline?" I said, extending my hand. He shook it limply. "Yes, I've heard about you. My cousin's little hospital romance. Very dramatic." The words were polite. The tone was poison. Thatcher materialized at my side like he'd sensed trouble. "Prescott, Thatcher, my condolences. Grandmother was quite a woman." Prescott's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure she'd be interested in the company you're keeping." "Careful." Thatcher's voice went cold in a way I'd never heard. "Evangeline was with her at the end, which is more than I can say for you. I was in Tokyo, business, you know how it is." Prescott's eyes flicked between us. "Or perhaps you don't lately. I heard you've been rather distracted." The tension was thick enough to cut. Other people were starting to notice, conversations quieting around us. "If you'll excuse us," Thatcher said tightly, steering me away. "What was that about?" I asked when we were out of earshot. "Prescott's been angling for control of the company since we were kids. He thought grandmother would leave it to him." Thatcher's hand was tight on my elbow. "He's going to be very disappointed." The Ashfords were harder to dismiss. Camden and Serafina Ashford looked like they'd stepped out of a Ralph Lauren ad. Old money and older bloodlines, the kind of people who could trace their lineage back to the Mayflower. Their daughter Juliet was a softer version of her mother, blonde and delicate in the way that spoke of private schools and cotillions. "Thatcher, darling." Serafina pulled him into an embrace that lasted just a beat too long. "We're devastated. Vivienne was like family. Thank you for coming." "Of course we came. Where else would we be?" Camden shook Thatcher's hand. "She was there when we needed her. We'll be there for you now." Juliet hung back slightly, her eyes on Thatcher with something I couldn't quite read. Not just sympathy. Something more complicated. "We should have dinner soon," Serafina continued. "Just the families, the way Vivienne would have wanted." "This is Evangeline," Thatcher said, pulling me forward. I wanted to disappear. She was my grandmother's nurse. The temperature in the conversation dropped about 20 degrees. "How lovely," Serafina said, in a tone that meant the opposite. "That must have been rewarding work." "It was an honor," I said, hating how defensive I sounded. Juliet finally spoke, her voice soft. "Grandmother Vivienne spoke very highly of you, Thatcher. She was so proud of everything you've accomplished." The familiarity in the words "Grandmother Vivienne" made it clear. These families were entwined, had been for generations, and I was the outsider. The reception dragged on for hours. I tried to be invisible, tried to just stand beside Thatcher and not embarrass him. But everywhere I turned, I caught whispers. "Who is she?" "A nurse, apparently, from County General." "How did they even meet?" "Do you think it's serious?" "He can't be serious." "Poor thing. She has no idea what she's gotten herself into." I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a break from the scrutiny. The powder room was larger than my entire apartment, all marble and gold fixtures and fresh flowers. 2 women came in while I was washing my hands, society types I'd seen talking to the Ashfords earlier. "Did you see the way Prescott was looking at her?" One said, not noticing me at first, like she was something the cat dragged in. "Can you blame him? She's clearly after the money. Why else would someone like that be with someone like Thatcher?" I give it 6 months, once the grief wears off and he sees clearly again. I cleared my throat. They both jumped, faces flushing when they realized I was there. "Excuse me," I said quietly, pushing past them, but their words followed me out. Back in the main hall, I found Thatcher cornered by a group of older men, board members, I guessed, from the way they were talking about quarterly reports and market shares at a funeral reception. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, just to have something to do with my hands. It was better champagne than I'd ever tasted, crisp and golden, and probably worth more per bottle than I made in a week. "You look lost." Juliet Ashford had appeared beside me, a sympathetic smile on her face. Up close she was even prettier, porcelain skin, perfectly applied makeup, the kind of natural elegance that couldn't be learned. "Just trying to stay out of the way," I said. "These things are overwhelming." She sipped her own champagne. "I've been going to them my whole life, and I still find them exhausting." "You knew Mrs. Holay well?" "Oh, yes. Our families are very close. Vivian was my godmother, actually." Juliet's eyes drifted to Thatcher. She had very specific ideas about how things should be, about tradition, family, legacy. There was something in her tone that made my skin prickle. "Thatcher and I practically grew up together," she continued. "Summer houses, family dinners, holidays. Our parents always joked that we'd end up married." She laughed, but it sounded forced. Of course, that was just talk. But Vivian did love the idea of keeping everything in the family. "I see," I said, though I didn't. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to. "Anyway," Juliet's smile brightened. "I'm glad Thatcher had someone during this difficult time, even if it's just temporary." The reception finally wound down around 8. People left in clusters, air-kissing and making promises to have lunch, to stay in touch, to be there for Thatcher during this difficult transition. I helped the staff clear glasses and plates, needing something to do with my hands, until Thatcher caught me. "What are you doing?" "Just helping." "You're not the help, Evangeline. You're with me." But the distinction felt blurry. I was with him, yes, but I wasn't like these people. Wasn't part of this world of old money and older bloodlines, of summer houses and cotillions and families so entwined they had pet names for each other's grandmothers. We drove back to the estate in silence. Thatcher was exhausted, grief and stress etched into every line of his face. I wanted to comfort him, but I didn't know how to bridge the gap that had felt so much wider today. "Thank you for being there," he said when we pulled up to the house. The house that would never feel like home to me, no matter how many times I visited. "Of course." He pulled me close, kissing me with a desperation that felt like drowning. "I couldn't have done this without you. You're stronger than you think." "No." He rested his forehead against mine. "I'm really not." We went inside, into that beautiful, cold, perfect house that suddenly felt like a mausoleum. Vivian was gone. The funeral was over, and now we had to figure out what came next. I had no idea that tomorrow everything would change. That tomorrow Thatcher's lawyer would read Vivian's will, and I'd finally understand what she'd been trying to warn me about. That tomorrow I'd learn the real cost of loving Thatcher Holay. If you're still with me, hit that like button, because what happens next changes everything. The will, the ultimatum, the impossible choice. It's all coming in the next part, and I promise you're not ready for it. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever felt completely out of place somewhere? Have you ever known you didn't belong but stayed anyway? Because that's exactly where Evangeline is right now, on the edge of 2 worlds, about to find out which one she'll be forced to choose. The knock on my apartment door came at 11:30 that night. I wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody from the hospital knew where I lived, and I didn't exactly have a social circle in this part of town. When I looked through the peephole and saw Thatcher standing there, still in his funeral suit, my heart stuttered. I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" I didn't want to be alone in that house. His voice was raw. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, suddenly hyper-aware of my tiny studio apartment. 400 square feet of cramped space that I could barely afford on a nurse's salary. The paint was peeling in one corner. The radiator clanked. My furniture was a mix of thrift store finds and things I'd salvaged from the curb on trash day. Through the window, I could see his driver standing beside a black Mercedes that looked obscenely out of place on my street. The man kept glancing around nervously, like he expected someone to jump out of the shadows. "Your driver looks uncomfortable," I said, closing the door. "He is. I made him drive me to what he called that neighborhood." Thatcher looked around my apartment, and I braced myself for judgment. But his expression was just tired. "This is where you've been living?" "It's not much, but it's mine." I didn't mean it like that. He sat down on my lumpy futon, the only real furniture I had besides a small table and two mismatched chairs. I hate that you've been going back and forth between the estate and this. I should have realized." "I'm fine, Thatcher." But he wasn't listening. His composure, so carefully maintained through the funeral and reception, was crumbling. His hands were shaking. His breathing was uneven. "I can't go back there," he said suddenly. "To the estate. Every room has her in it. Her perfume is still in the bathroom. Her reading glasses are on the nightstand. Her coffee cup is in the sink because I couldn't bring myself to wash it." I sat beside him on the futon, our thighs touching in the cramped space. "Thatcher!" She was all I had left. The words came out broken. "My parents died when I was 12. Vivian raised me. She was my mother, my father, my whole world. And now she's gone, and I'm supposed to just, what, keep going? Run the company? Make decisions? I don't know how to do this without her." He wasn't crying yet, but he was close. I could see him fighting it, trying to hold on to some semblance of control. "You don't have to be strong right now," I said softly. "Not here, not with me." That's when he broke. He buried his face in my shoulder and sobbed. Deep, wrenching sounds that seemed to come from somewhere primal. I held him, running my fingers through his hair, whispering things that probably didn't make sense but seemed to help anyway. "You have me," I said when he finally quieted. "I know it's not the same. I know I can't replace her, but you're not alone, Thatcher. You have me." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes red and swollen. "I love you." The words hung in the air between us. We'd never said it before, had been dancing around it for weeks, maybe knowing but not speaking it aloud. "I love you too," I whispered. He kissed me then, soft and desperate, tasting like salt from his tears. His hands cupped my face like I was something precious, something he was afraid of breaking. We moved to my bed, barely bigger than a twin, with sheets I'd bought on clearance and a comforter that had seen better days. Nothing like the luxury he was used to, but he didn't seem to notice or care. We made love slowly, tenderly, like we had all the time in the world, like we weren't from different universes, like nothing existed except the two of us in that tiny apartment with the radiator clanking and the sounds of the city filtering through thin walls. Afterwards, we lay tangled together in the narrow bed, his body curved around mine in the small space. "I keep thinking about what she said," Thatcher murmured against my hair. "Choose love, always choose love." "She was talking about us." "I know." His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder, then moved to my face, touching my features like he was memorizing them. "Move in with me." I turned in his arms to face him. "What?" "Move in with me, to the penthouse. I don't want you living here anymore, going back and forth. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to come home to you every night." His eyes were intense despite the exhaustion. "I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a few months, but I also know I don't want to spend another night without you." Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was too much, too soon. We were still in the early stages of grief. He was making decisions from emotion, not logic. I should say no, should give us both time to breathe and think clearly. But I didn't want to be rational. "Yes," I said. "Okay, yes." I moved into Thatcher's penthouse 3 days later. It should have felt overwhelming, going from 400 square feet to 4,000, from peeling paint to floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the entire city. But Thatcher had done something I didn't expect. He'd made space for me, real space. The walk-in closet was split down the middle, His side held rows of perfectly tailored suits and designer shoes. My side had a section specifically for my scrubs, my thrift store finds, my clearance rack bargains. He'd even labeled it with a little sign that said, Evangelines, in elegant script. He'd created a reading nook by the windows, a comfortable chair, a lamp, a small bookshelf already stocked with novels I'd mentioned loving. There was a kitchen drawer filled with the specific brand of tea I drank. A corner of the bathroom counter cleared for my drugstore makeup and skincare products. "I want you to feel like this is home," he said, watching me explore. "Not just my place that you're staying in. Our home." "It's perfect," I said, and meant it. But I also meant what I said the next morning over breakfast. "I'm keeping my job at County General." He looked up from his coffee. "I wasn't going to ask you to quit. Some people might expect it. Now that I'm living here, with you, those people don't matter." He reached across the table to take my hand. "What you do at that hospital, the way you care for people who can't afford better care, who fall through every crack in the system, it's incredible. Those people need you. Thank you for understanding. I'm just in awe of you," he said quietly. "Every single day." We found our rhythm quickly. I worked my shifts at County General, the 12-hour days that left me exhausted and smelling like hospital disinfectant. Thatcher threw himself into running the Holay Foundation, the charity arm of his family's empire that his grandmother had started decades ago. Weekends we spent at the estate. I couldn't bring myself to go into Vivian's room yet, but I could work in her gardens. They'd been neglected since she got sick, and there was something healing about restoring them, getting dirt under my fingernails, coaxing life back into plants that had been left to wither. Thatcher would sit on the terrace with his laptop, working but watching me. Sometimes he'd come down and help, even though he clearly had no idea what he was doing with the plants. "You're going to kill that rosebush," I said one Saturday afternoon, watching him prune with absolutely no technique. "I'm helping. You're murdering. There's a difference." He laughed and pulled me close, getting dirt on his expensive shirt. "Teach me then." So I did. And he actually tried to learn, even though we both knew he'd never be good at it. Those 3 months felt like a fairy tale, like we'd found our happily ever after, despite everything, like maybe love really could be enough. But I started feeling off around week 10. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion. I'd been picking up extra shifts, trying to prove to myself that moving in with Thatcher hadn't changed who I was. But the fatigue was different, bone deep. And then came the nausea. I missed my period, then missed it again. The pregnancy test sat in my bathroom drawer for 3 days before I could bring myself to take it. I kept making excuses, stress, irregular cycles, anything but the obvious answer. Finally, on a Sunday morning while Thatcher was at the estate dealing with some business matter, I took the test to the bathroom. Not our bathroom at the Penthouse. The bathroom at the estate, in a guest wing far from where anyone would disturb me. I sat on the cold marble floor and waited. 2 pink lines appeared almost immediately. Pregnant. I stared at those lines, my hand moving instinctively to my still flat stomach. We'd been together less than 6 months. We'd never discussed children, never talked about timelines, or whether we even wanted kids. Fear warred with something else, something that felt dangerously close to joy. I found Thatcher in Vivian's study, the one room in the house he'd actually been using, surrounded by her books and photos and the faint smell of her perfume. "Hey," he said, looking up from whatever document he was reviewing. "I thought you were at the Penthouse." "I was. I came here. I needed to tell you something." Something in my tone made him stand up, concern flooding his face. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm pregnant." For 3 seconds, Thatcher just stared at me, frozen, his expression completely unreadable. Then he crossed the room in 2 strides, lifted me off my feet, and spun me around. "We're having a baby." His voice cracked with emotion. "We're really having a baby?" "We're really having a baby," I confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. He set me down carefully, immediately putting his hand on my stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet. I can't even." He was grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "Marry me." I blinked. "What?" Marry me. I know I should have a ring and a better plan and probably should do this somewhere more romantic than my dead grandmother's study, but I don't care. Marry me, Evangeline. Let's do this whole thing together, the baby, the life, everything. Yes. I didn't even hesitate. Yes, of course, yes. He kissed me then, deep and certain and full of promise. When we pulled apart, we were both crying. We should call your father, he said. And we need to find a good OB. And we should probably tell Marlo, because she'll kill me if she finds out from someone else. And Thatcher. I put my hand on his chest, feeling his heart racing. Breathe, we have time. But we didn't, not really. We just didn't know it yet. The next 2 weeks were the happiest of my life. We found an OB, Dr. Sarah Chen, who came highly recommended and had an office that didn't feel too clinical. Our first appointment was on a Tuesday. Thatcher rearranged his entire schedule to be there. Hearing the heartbeat for the first time broke us both. It was fast and strong, like hummingbird wings. This tiny, perfect sound that represented our future. That's our baby, Thatcher whispered, squeezing my hand so tight it almost hurt. That's our baby, I repeated, unable to stop crying. Dr. Chen printed out ultrasound images. Just a blob at this stage, but our blob. Thatcher immediately made it the background on his phone. We started planning a wedding. Nothing huge, nothing ostentatious. Just something small and intimate at the estate, maybe in the gardens I'd been restoring. Close friends and family only. I called my father in Atlanta. He cried happy tears and promised to come up for the wedding. Asked if Thatcher was treating me right, if I was sure about this, if I needed anything. I'm sure, Dad, I told him. I've never been more sure of anything. We told Marlo, Thatcher's assistant, over coffee one afternoon. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd worked for the Holay family for decades. I'd liked her immediately. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Finally, she said, when we shared the news, I was wondering when you two would figure it out. We kept the pregnancy mostly quiet, otherwise, just our small circle. We wanted to get through the first trimester before making any big announcements. Everything felt perfect, like we'd weathered the worst and come out stronger. I should have known better. Thatcher became obsessed with taking care of me, making sure I ate enough, slept enough, wasn't working too hard. He'd leave little notes around the penthouse, reminders to take my prenatal vitamins, messages about how much he loved me, terrible dad jokes that made me groan and laugh at the same time. He bought pregnancy books and actually read them cover to cover, started asking Dr. Chen questions at our appointments that were so detailed and specific she had to laugh. You're going to be an amazing father, I told him one night. We were lying in bed, his hand on my stomach where the tiniest swell was just starting to show. I'm terrified, he admitted. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not good enough? You're already good enough. You're more than enough. We talked about names, argued playfully about whether we'd find out the sex or be surprised, made plans to convert one of the penthouse bedrooms into a nursery. Nothing too themed, I said. I don't want, like, a whole jungle situation. What about space? Kids love space. Thatcher, our baby isn't even born yet, and you want to give them an existential crisis about the vastness of the universe. He laughed, pulling me closer. Fair point. Everything seemed perfect, right? They were in love, expecting a baby, planning a wedding. But if you've been paying attention, you know perfect doesn't last in stories like this. Keep watching. The twist is coming, and it's going to hurt. And if you're feeling this story, hit that like button. Trust me, you're going to want to remember this moment of happiness. Because what comes next changes everything. The call came from Marlo on a Wednesday morning. I was at the hospital halfway through a shift when my phone buzzed. Evangeline, I need you to come to Whitmore and Associates as soon as possible. Thatcher's already on his way. My stomach dropped. What's wrong? Is he okay? He's fine, but there are complications. With Mrs. Holloway's will, the lawyers need to meet with both of you. I'm working until 7. This can't wait. I've already called County General and explained you have a family emergency. They're covering your shift. Family emergency. The words felt ominous. I changed out of my scrubs in the locker room, my hands shaking. Whatever this was, it was bad. Marlowe's voice had been tight with something I'd never heard from her before. Fear. Whitmore and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a building in the financial district. Everything about it was designed to intimidate. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city from 40 stories up. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where Thatcher was already waiting. He stood when I entered, pulling me into a tight embrace. "What's going on?" I whispered, "I don't know yet. They said they needed us both here before they'd explain." Then I noticed we weren't alone. Prescott sat across the table, a smirk playing at his lips. He looked like he was enjoying himself, which immediately set my nerves on edge. Beside him were the Ashfords. Camden looked bored, checking his phone periodically. Serafina was whispering something to Juliet, who kept glancing at Thatcher with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not quite sympathy, something more complicated. "Why are they here?" Thatcher asked, his voice hard. "All will be explained," said the man at the head of the table. Herbert Whitmore was ancient, probably in his 80s, with kind eyes that currently held far too much sympathy for my comfort. "Please, sit, both of you." We sat. Thatcher took my hand under the table, his grip tight. "I'll begin with the standard bequests," Herbert said, opening a leather folder. Mrs. Holay was extremely generous to her staff, to various charities, to old friends. But the bulk of the estate, the Holay Industries shares, the foundation, the properties, the liquid assets, those are addressed in a separate section. He paused, and I felt Thatcher tense beside me. "To my beloved grandson, Thatcher Edmund Holay," Herbert read, "I leave the entirety of my estate with the following conditions." Conditions. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Condition 1. Thatcher must marry before his 35th birthday. I felt the blood drain from my face. Thatcher's birthday was January 7th, 8 weeks away. Condition 2. Said marriage must be to a woman of established social standing, from a family approved by the Holay Industries Board of Directors. Established social standing. Approved family. I thought of the bathroom whispers at the funeral, the way the Ashfords had looked at me, Juliet's pointed comments about tradition and keeping things in the family. Condition 3. Thatcher must produce an heir, legitimized through said marriage, before his 35th birthday. Produce an heir, legitimized through said marriage. My hand moved instinctively to my stomach, where our baby was growing. The baby that, according to this will, didn't count. Couldn't count, because I wasn't from an approved family. If these conditions are not met in their entirety, Herbert continued, his voice heavy with regret, the estate in its entirety passes to Prescott Bartholomew Holay. Prescott's smirk widened into a full smile. "Well," he said, "this is delicious." "There's more," Herbert said. Mrs. Holay included an explanation, a letter, actually, to you, Thatcher. He slid a piece of paper across the table. Vivian's handwriting, elegant and precise, even as her health had been failing. Thatcher read it aloud, his voice shaking. "My dearest Thatcher, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're angry with me. You have every right to be. These conditions seem cruel, but please understand, this is not about control. This is about protection. The Holay Foundation supports 12,000 families. 12,000. If the estate falls into the wrong hands, if someone without proper understanding takes control, those families lose everything. The company employs 800 people directly, supports thousands more indirectly. I've seen what happens when old money and new love collide. I've seen reputations destroyed, fortunes squandered, legacies crumbled. Your parents..." Thatcher's voice broke. He couldn't continue. I took the letter from his trembling hands and read the rest. "Your parents married for love. Your mother wasn't from our world. My parents, your great-grandparents, fought it viciously. The scandal nearly destroyed everything. They learned to navigate it eventually, but it cost them years of happiness and nearly bankrupted the foundation. I cannot afford another scandal. The foundation cannot afford it. Choose wisely, my darling boy. Choose with your head as well as your heart. I love you. I always will. Vivian." 8 weeks. Prescott said, leaning back in his chair like he was settling in to watch a show. You have 8 weeks to marry someone from an approved family, get her pregnant, and produce proof. Otherwise, I inherit everything. You can't be serious, Thatcher said. It's impossible. It's designed to fail. It's designed to ensure proper stewardship of the family legacy, Herbert said gently. Mrs. Holay was very specific in her requirements. She wanted to control me from beyond the grave. Thatcher stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is absurd. I'll fight it. I'll challenge the will. You can try, Prescott said, but court challenges take years. Meanwhile, what happens to the foundation, to the company, to all those families depending on Holay money? He was right, and we all knew it. Even if Thatcher fought and eventually won, the damage would be done. Prescott would have years to dismantle everything, to strip assets, to destroy what generations had built. Thatcher's hand found mine again. His palm was sweating. There has to be another way, I said. There has to be. There isn't. Prescott's eyes were cold. Well, there is one way, but I don't think you're going to like it. Thatcher pulled me from the conference room before anyone could say anything else. We didn't speak in the elevator, didn't speak walking through the lobby, didn't speak until we were back at the Penthouse. Then he poured himself a scotch and downed it in one swallow. I stood by the windows, arms wrapped around myself, feeling the baby shift inside me. Not actual movement yet, too early for that. But I swear, I could feel it anyway. This life we'd created, this future we'd planned, suddenly transformed from blessing to complication. Say something, I finally whispered. I'm going to fight it. His voice was hard, determined. I'll get lawyers, better lawyers. We'll challenge the will on grounds of mental incapacity or undue influence or something. There has to be a legal precedent. Thatcher, I turned to face him. How long will that take? I don't know. Months, maybe years. And in the meantime, what happens to the foundation, to all those families depending on it? He poured another scotch. I don't care. Yes, you do, that's the problem. You care too much to let it all collapse while you fight a battle you might not win. The truth settled over us like ash. A court challenge would take years. Even with the best lawyers money could buy, challenging a will, especially one drafted by someone as sharp as Vivian, with counsel as prestigious as Whitmore and Associates, was a long, complicated process. Meanwhile, Prescott would have control. He'd be able to make decisions, redirect funds, dismantle programs. The foundation would be gutted before we ever saw the inside of a courtroom. 12,000 families. That's what Vivian had written. 12,000 families who depended on Holay Foundation grants for food, housing, medical care, education. I'm already pregnant, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. We can get married next week. I'll try to fit in. I'll learn the right things to say, wear the right clothes. Thatcher's laugh was bitter and broke my heart. They won't approve you, love. Not because you're not extraordinary, not because you wouldn't be perfect, but because you're not one of them. He didn't say the rest. Didn't have to. I was black. I was working class. My family didn't have a Wikipedia page or a lineage you could trace back generations. My father worked in a factory. I'd put myself through nursing school with loans I was still paying off. None of that mattered to Thatcher. But it would matter to the board. It would matter to people like Prescott, like the Ashfords, like everyone at that funeral who'd whispered about me in bathrooms. Prescott already has lawyers lined up, Thatcher said quietly. Marlowe told me he's prepared to challenge any marriage to you as fraud, as me trying to circumvent the spirit of the will while ignoring its actual requirements. Thatcher's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. It's Camden Ashford. He wants to meet, says he has a solution. A solution? The word tasted like poison. I'm not going, Thatcher said, setting the phone down. I don't want to hear whatever he's selling. But Marlowe called 30 seconds later. You need to take this meeting. I know you don't want to. I know what he's probably going to propose, but you need to hear it. You need to know all your options before you make a decision. So we went, because what else could we do? Camden Ashford's office was all glass and steel, modern and cold, designed to make visitors feel small. We sat across from him in chairs that were deliberately uncomfortable, watching him swirl cognac in a crystal glass. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries," Camden said. "You have a problem. I have a solution." "I'm listening," Thatcher said, his voice flat. "Marry Juliet." The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't detonated yet. "She's been in love with you since you were teenagers," Camden continued, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. "Your families have been intertwined for generations. Her lineage is impeccable." The board would rubber stamp approval without hesitation. "No." I stood up. "Absolutely not. This conversation is over." "Sit down," Camden said, not even looking at me. "The adults are talking." Thatcher's hand shot out, gripping my wrist gently. Not to control me, but to steady himself. "Don't talk to her like that." "Fine. Let me rephrase." Camden finally looked at me, his eyes cold. "This is a business discussion about the future of a multi-billion-dollar estate and a foundation that supports thousands of people. You're welcome to stay and listen, but you don't get a vote." "She gets a vote because she's carrying my child," Thatcher said, his voice dangerous. "Because I love her. Because whatever decision we make together." Camden smiled. "Love, how touching. Let me tell you what love gets you in this situation. Nothing. It gets you a collapsed foundation, a destroyed legacy, and thousands of families suffering because you were too stubborn to do what needed to be done. Here's what I'm proposing," Camden said, leaning forward. "You marry Juliet, satisfy the terms of the will, secure the inheritance and keep the foundation intact. Then, after a suitable period, a year, maybe 2, you divorce quietly. Juliet gets a generous settlement. You get your freedom and your precious foundation. Everyone wins." "Except Evangeline," Thatcher said. "I'm sorry, who are you in this equation?" Camden's eyes found mine, and there was nothing but contempt there. "Because legally, currently, you're no one. Just a woman who happened to get pregnant at a very inconvenient time." Thatcher stood so fast his chair toppled over. "Watch your mouth. We're done here." "Are you?" Camden remained seated, unbothered. "Because I think you're just getting started. Sit down and listen to the rest." There was something in his tone, a confidence, that made my blood run cold. Thatcher righted his chair and sat, his jaw tight. I could feel the anger radiating off him in waves. "Marry Juliet," Camden said again. "Satisfy the will's requirements, then revisit your personal situation." He glanced at me. "If she's still around." The implications were clear. Marry Juliet. Have a child with her to satisfy the heir requirement. Then, maybe, eventually, come back to me. As if I were something you could put on hold. As if our child didn't matter. "Get out," Thatcher said quietly. "I'm already leaving, but think about it." Camden stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Think about those 12,000 families. Think about everything your grandmother built. Think about your legacy." He paused at the door. "I've already spoken to 3 foundation board members. They're prepared to do whatever's necessary to ensure proper stewardship of Holay resources." "What does that mean?" I asked. Camden turned back, and his smile was that of a snake who'd already swallowed his prey. "It means they're prepared to testify that your relationship with Mrs. Holay constituted elder abuse, that you isolated her from family and friends, that you had undue influence over her in her final days, that you possibly manipulated her medication schedule." The room tilted. "That's a lie. I never—" "Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters what they're willing to testify to in court." Camden's eyes were cold. A young woman financially struggling, suddenly very close to a dying billionaire, now pregnant right after said billionaire's death, conveniently trying to claim legitimacy for a child that would inherit everything. The optics are terrible. "You're threatening her," Thatcher said. "I'm explaining reality. If you try to marry her, if you try to use this pregnancy to circumvent the will's requirements, we will destroy her. Her nursing license, her reputation, her future. We'll drag her through every court and every headline until there's nothing left." "And the foundation?" I asked, finding my voice. "You'll let it collapse under the weight of scandal just to prove a point?" "Oh, the foundation will be fine. Camden said. Once you do the sensible thing and marry Juliet, once you stop this ridiculous romance and think about your responsibilities, the scandal goes away, the foundation survives. Those 12,000 families keep getting their support. He checked his watch. You have until the end of the week to decide. After that, we start making calls to journalists, to licensing boards, to anyone who'll listen to the story of how a poor nurse manipulated a dying woman and tried to steal a fortune. Then he left, his footsteps echoing in the glass corridor outside. Thatcher and I sat in the wreckage of his words, not touching, barely breathing. He's bluffing, Thatcher said finally. He has to be bluffing. But we both knew he wasn't. We sat there for hours, trying to find a way out that didn't exist, trying to solve a problem that had no solution. Because every path led to destruction. Either the foundation collapsed and thousands of families suffered, or I lost everything. Or we both lost each other. Vivienne had said, choose love. But what she hadn't told us was what to do when choosing love meant destroying everything else you cared about. If you're still watching, drop a comment and tell me, what would you do in this situation? Would you sacrifice your own happiness for thousands of strangers? Would you fight, even if it meant losing everything? Because what Evangeline chooses next, what they both choose, it's going to break your heart. Hit that subscribe button because the next part reveals the decision that changes everything. And trust me, you're not ready for it. That night, we lay in bed, not touching. It was the first time since we'd gotten together that we'd been in the same bed and maintained physical distance. Like if we touched, we'd both shatter into pieces too small to ever put back together. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I won't do it, Thatcher said finally, his voice rough in the darkness. I'll find another way. There has to be another way. I wanted to believe him, wanted to close my eyes and pretend that love could solve this, that wanting something badly enough could make it real. But I'd spent the hours since Camden's meeting running through every scenario in my head, and they all ended the same way. Think about the optics, I said quietly. Really think about them. You, the billionaire heir, fighting your grandmother's will to marry the nurse who cared for her at the end, the nurse who's conveniently pregnant, the nurse who isn't from your world. I don't care what people think. But the board does. The lawyers do. The press will. I turn to face him in the darkness. They'll tear us apart in every headline. They'll question the legitimacy of the baby. They'll drag out the fight for years while the foundation bleeds money on legal fees and loses credibility. Your grandmother's legacy would die in the process, I continued. Everything she built, everything she sacrificed for, it would all collapse under the weight of scandal and litigation. Thatcher was quiet for a long moment. Then let it die. I choose you. I choose us. The words should have filled me with hope. Instead, they filled me with terror. What happens in 5 years? I asked, what happens when you wake up one morning and realize you destroyed everything your grandmother built for you? Everything your parents would have wanted you to protect? What happens when you look at our child and think about what they could have had, the legacy, the security, the opportunities, if you'd just made a different choice? I would never. You'd resent me. My voice cracked. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but eventually the weight of what you gave up would poison everything between us. You'd look at me and see the reason the foundation collapsed, the reason 12,000 families lost their support, the reason the Holay name became synonymous with scandal instead of legacy. That's not fair. None of this is fair. I sat up, pulling the blanket around myself. But it's the truth, Thatcher. You love your grandmother's memory. You love what she built. You love knowing that the work you do changes lives. Could you really walk away from all of that and not eventually hate me for it? He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because we both knew I was right. He pulled me back down, wrapping his arms around me from behind, his hand finding its familiar place on my stomach, where our baby was growing. We held each other and cried until dawn broke through the windows, painting everything in shades of grey that matched exactly how I felt inside. The next week was a blur of lawyers, different firms, different specialties, different approaches. But they all said the same thing, just in varying degrees of legal jargon. The will was ironclad. Vivian had used the best estate planning attorneys in the country. Every possible loophole had been anticipated and closed. Every challenge had been considered and defended against. A court challenge would take years, 2, maybe 3, possibly more. It would cost millions in legal fees, and at the end of it all, there was no guarantee of success. Mrs. Holay was of sound mind when she drafted this, one lawyer explained, spreading documents across the conference table. We have her medical records, psychiatric evaluations, testimonies from multiple physicians. Any claim of diminished capacity would be immediately dismissed. What about undue influence? Thatcher asked. From the board members, from people who wanted to control. She drafted this will 5 years ago, another lawyer interrupted. Long before her illness, long before any question of vulnerability. It's been updated periodically, but the core conditions remained consistent throughout. That demonstrates clear, sustained intent. And Camden's threat wasn't empty either. 3 foundation board members had already given depositions expressing concerns about my relationship with Vivian, about how quickly I'd gained her trust, about the amount of time I'd spent with her during her final weeks, about how convenient it was that I'd become romantically involved with her grandson. They're building a narrative, Marlowe explained one evening, her voice tight with anger, that you manipulated an elderly woman, that you isolated her from family, that you saw an opportunity and took it. But none of that is true, I said, feeling sick. Doesn't matter. They just need to create enough doubt, enough scandal, enough questions that any marriage between you and Thatcher looks suspect. I watched Thatcher stop sleeping. He'd lie beside me for hours, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through scenarios that all ended badly. Some nights, he'd get up and work until dawn, desperately searching for a solution that didn't exist. He lost weight. His eyes developed permanent dark circles. The easy smile I'd fallen in love with disappeared, replaced by a grim determination that scared me. He was being torn in half. On one side, me, our baby, the future we'd planned, the love that had felt strong enough to overcome anything. On the other side, his grandmother's legacy, the foundation that supported 12,000 families, the company that employed hundreds, the weight of responsibility he'd carried since he was 12 years old and his parents died. And in the middle, Thatcher, breaking under the pressure of an impossible choice. I met with the foundation directors today, he said one night, his voice hollow. Showed them the numbers for our new housing initiative, the one that would provide homes for 200 families over the next 5 years. He poured himself a drink. Prescott was there, made sure everyone knew that if he inherits, that initiative gets cut, along with the scholarship program, the medical grants, the emergency assistance fund. Everything that doesn't directly generate profit gets eliminated. He told me this while smiling, like it was funny, like destroying people's lives was some kind of game he was winning. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? Juliet came to see me 3 days later. She'd texted asking to meet, somewhere neutral, somewhere private. I chose a small cafe near the hospital, the kind of place where nobody from her world would ever think to look. She arrived looking effortlessly beautiful, in a way that made me feel shabby by comparison. Cashmere sweater, designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to, hair that fell in perfect waves, old money personified, but her eyes were sad. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm not sure why I did." She ordered tea. I ordered coffee, even though it made me nauseous these days. I needed something to do with my hands. "I don't want to do this," Juliet said once the server left. "For what it's worth, I think my father's plan is cruel. I think what's happening to you is unfair. But you're here anyway. I'm here to be honest with you." She met my eyes. I do love him. I always have. Since we were teenagers at summer parties, since family dinners and holiday gatherings, I've loved Thatcher Holay for most of my life. The words hit like a physical blow, even though I'd suspected as much. "But he doesn't love you," I said. "No, he doesn't." She smiled sadly, and I've made peace with that. If I marry him, if we go through with my father's plan, it will be a business arrangement. I won't expect him to love me. I won't push for Anything beyond what's necessary to satisfy the will's requirements. And when it's over, when enough time has passed and the inheritance is secure, I'll step aside. You make it sound so simple, I said. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. Juliet wrapped her hands around her teacup. Thatcher marries me. We maintain the appearance of a proper marriage for a year, maybe 2. We have a child, through whatever means necessary, whether natural or assisted. The will's conditions are satisfied. Prescott's challenge becomes moot. The foundation stays intact. Then what? Then we divorce quietly. I get a settlement that's already been negotiated. I go on with my life. And Thatcher is free to find you again, to build the family he actually wants. She made it sound so reasonable, so logical, like people were chess pieces you could move around a board. And what about your child? I asked. The one you'd have with him just to satisfy a legal requirement. What happens to that child when you divorce and Thatcher goes back to his real family? Something flickered across Juliet's face. Pain, maybe, or guilt. That child would be loved and provided for. They'd have every advantage, every opportunity. They'd understand that sometimes families look different than expected. They'd understand that they were a means to an end, I said bitterly. Better than not existing at all because the foundation collapsed and Thatcher spent years fighting a legal battle he couldn't win. Juliet's voice was sharp now. You're thinking about your feelings, your hurt, your sense of injustice. But what about those 12,000 families? What about the children in our scholarship program? The patients in our medical assistance program? Do their lives matter less because you fell in love at an inconvenient time? How noble of you, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm, sacrificing yourself for the greater good. I'm not sacrificing anything, Juliet shot back. I'd get a husband I've wanted for years, even if it's temporary. I'd get a child I actually want. Yes, I want children, even under these circumstances. I'd get to be part of preserving something meaningful. What exactly am I sacrificing? She leaned forward. But you'd be sacrificing your pride, your sense of how things should be, your fairy tale ending. And I'm asking you to think about whether that's really more important than the real-world consequences of letting everything collapse. The question hung between us like a blade. If he refuses, Juliet continued, her voice softer now, Prescott wins. Everything Vivian built gets destroyed or perverted. The foundation becomes a shell of itself if it survives at all. Thatcher spends years in court, fighting battles on multiple fronts. You get dragged through the mud, your reputation, your nursing license, your ability to provide for your child. Even if you win eventually, what's left? What does that victory actually look like? I wanted to argue, wanted to find a flaw in her logic, a reason to dismiss everything she was saying. But I couldn't, because she was right. I'm not your enemy, Juliet said quietly. I know it feels like I am. I know you see me as the woman trying to steal the man you love. But I'm just a person trying to find the least destructive path through an impossible situation. A situation your father created. My father saw an opportunity and took it. That's what he does. But the situation itself, that was Vivian's doing. She's the one who put these conditions in the will. She's the one who created this trap. Juliet finished her tea and stood to leave. I don't expect you to like me. I don't expect you to forgive me if this moves forward. But I did want you to understand that I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I genuinely believe it's the best option available. She paused at the table, looking down at me with something that might have been pity. I also wanted you to know that if you walk away, if you disappear and let Thatcher do what needs to be done, I'll make sure he finds you again when it's over. I'll help him even, because he deserves to be happy, even if it's not with me. Then she left, leaving me alone with cold coffee and the terrible truth she'd spoken. She wasn't my enemy. She was just another person caught in the web Vivienne had woven, trying to survive the best way she knew how. And everything she'd said about the consequences, about the lives at stake, about the impossibility of fighting, all of it was true. I sat there for over an hour, one hand on my stomach, feeling the baby move. This tiny life that should have been a blessing but had become a complication. This child who deserved better than being born into scandal and legal battles, and a father torn apart by impossible choices. And slowly, horribly, a plan began to form. I found Thatcher in the study that night, surrounded by paperwork. He looked like a ghost. hollow-eyed, unshaven, wearing the same clothes he'd had on that morning. There were empty coffee cups scattered across the desk, legal briefs marked up with angry notes, his laptop open to a document titled Challenge Strategies. "Marry her," I said from the doorway. His head snapped up. "What?" "Marry Juliet. Save the foundation. Honor your grandmother's wishes." I crossed the room and knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in mine. They were cold, trembling slightly. "If you fight this, you lose," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "The foundation collapses under the weight of legal fees and scandal. Your reputation gets destroyed. Our baby becomes tabloid fodder. Every headline will question the timing, the legitimacy, my motives. We'll spend years in court, and even if we win, what's left? A gutted foundation? A family name synonymous with scandal instead of charity? Evangeline." "But if you do this," I continued, the words coming faster now before I could lose my nerve, "if you marry Juliet for a year or two, secure everything, satisfy the will's requirements, then we can still have our life. Just later, after everything is settled and safe." Thatcher's voice was hollow. "You're asking me to marry another woman while you're pregnant with my child. I'm asking you to be strategic." Tears were streaming down my face now. "I'm asking you to think about what your grandmother really wanted. She wanted the foundation protected. She wanted the legacy preserved. She wanted you to make the hard choice." "I can wait," I said, squeezing his hands. "I'll raise our baby, and when the time is right, when you've satisfied the will and secured everything and enough time has passed that no one can challenge it, you can find us. We can be a family then." Thatcher pulled me into his lap, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. His whole body was shaking. "I can't," he whispered against my hair. "I can't do this. I can't marry her and watch you walk away and pretend everything is fine. I can't, Evangeline." "You have to." I pulled back to look at him, cupping his face in my hands. "And I can't be here while you do it. I can't watch you marry someone else. I can't be the other woman lurking in the shadows while you play devoted husband. I can't put our child through that." Understanding dawned in his eyes. Horror, then acceptance, then devastation. "You're leaving," he said. "When you marry her, I need to be gone, completely. No scandal, no distraction, no ammunition for people like Prescott to use against you. You marry Juliet, you play the role perfectly, you secure the inheritance, I'll disappear. And later, when it's safe—" "When?" His voice cracked. "How much later? A year? 2? 5? However long it takes to make sure no one can challenge it, to make sure the foundation is protected, to make sure our child doesn't become a weapon someone uses against you." He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. "Promise me you'll find us," I whispered. "When it's over, when it's safe, promise me this isn't goodbye forever." "I promise." Thatcher's voice was wrecked. "God, I promise. I will find you. I will fix this. We will be a family. I swear on everything I have, on everything I am, I will find you." He kissed me then, desperate and tender and full of grief. His hands were in my hair, on my face, on my stomach where our baby grew. We made love that night like we were dying, like it was the last time we'd ever touch each other, slow and aching and so full of heartbreak I thought we'd both drown in it. Afterwards, we lay tangled together in the darkness, memorizing the feel of each other's bodies, the sound of each other's breathing. "I'll set you up somewhere," Thatcher said as dawn began to break. "A penthouse, a house, whatever you need. I'll put money in an account. Make sure you and the baby have everything." "No." I cut him off. "If I'm doing this, I'm doing it clean. No trail, no connection. Nothing that ties back to you that someone could find and use. You focus on securing the foundation. I'll be okay." "How will I find you if there's no trail?" "You'll find a way. You're Thatcher Holay. You find ways to do impossible things." I tried to smile. "Just not right away. Give it time. Let the marriage be real enough, long enough, that no one questions it when you divorce." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I should have fought harder. From the beginning. Should have told the board and Prescott and all of them to go to hell. Then 12,000 families would suffer, and you'd hate yourself for it. And eventually, you'd hate me too. I could never hate you. Yes, you could, given enough time and enough pain and enough regret. I turned to face him. This way, we have a chance. A real chance, someday. We spent the morning planning my disappearance like we were planning a military operation. I'd change my name, move out of state, far enough away that casual searches wouldn't find me, but not so far that returning would be impossible someday. I'd work under my maiden name, use my nursing credentials in a different state. No contact until he reached out. No calls, no emails, no social media. Complete radio silence. How long? I asked. How long do you think before it's safe? Thatcher had consulted with his lawyers about this exact question, even though hearing the answer would destroy us both. A year minimum to satisfy the marriage requirement, he said, his voice clinical, like distancing himself from the words would make them hurt less. But to make it uncontestable, to make sure Prescott or anyone else can't claim it was a sham marriage, probably 2 years, maybe longer. And the heir requirement? His jaw tightened. That's the part I don't know how to. You'll figure it out. I cut him off because I couldn't bear to hear him talk about having a child with Juliet. Whatever needs to happen for the will to be satisfied, you'll do it. And then you'll find us. He pulled out his phone, opened a new note, and started typing, things you need to tell me when I find you. The baby's birthday, first words, first steps, favorite foods, everything I'm going to miss. My throat closed up. I couldn't speak. I'm going to know our child, he continued, voice fierce. Every single detail you can remember, you're going to tell me. Promise me. I promise. We had 2 weeks before the wedding. Thatcher had called Camden the morning after our decision and agreed to the plan. The Ashfords moved fast. They'd clearly been preparing for this possibility. Invitations went out within days. The cathedral was booked. The reception venue secured. It would be a society event. 500 guests, all the right people, all the necessary appearances maintained. I helped him pick out his tuxedo, stood in the bedroom while he tried it on, looking devastating and miserable all at once. You look good, I said, my voice breaking. I look like I'm going to a funeral. He yanked off the bow tie. This is wrong. All of this is wrong. We should just run, take whatever money we can access and disappear together. Start over somewhere no one knows us. And let Prescott win, let the foundation collapse, let 12,000 families lose their support because we were selfish. He didn't have an answer to that. The plan was set. I'd leave 2 weeks before the wedding, give him time to focus, to commit to the role he needed to play. No messy goodbyes at the last minute. A clean break. On my last night in the penthouse, we didn't sleep, just held each other and talked about everything and nothing. Made promises we didn't know if we could keep. Memorized each other's faces like we were storing up memories for the famine ahead. I love you, he said as the sun began to rise. That will never change, no matter what happens, no matter how long this takes. I love you too, always. Morning came too fast. I'd refused to take much, just clothes, my nursing credentials, the ultrasound photo tucked into my wallet where I could see it every time I opened my purse. A reminder of what this was all for. Thatcher had tried to give me money, had tried to set me up with a place, a car, anything that would make this easier, but I'd refused all of it. No trail, no connection, I'd repeated. I need to disappear completely. Anything you give me is something they could trace. My suitcase sat by the door. I'd called a cab, refused to let him drive me or even have his driver take me. Every connection had to be severed. We stood in the penthouse doorway, not touching yet, because if we started, we'd never stop. Tell me about our child, he said. When I find you, tell me everything. Everything, I promised. And take care of yourself. Eat enough, sleep enough. Don't work too hard. I know you. You'll push yourself too much. I'll be careful. Promise me. I promise. Can you imagine making this choice, loving someone so much you walk away? Drop a comment right now. Would you have done what Evangeline did? Would you have believed Thatcher's promise? Because what happens next? It's going to test everything. Make sure you're subscribed because what comes after this moment is going to break your heart and put it back together. Hit that like button if you're feeling this story. The cab honked outside. "I have to go," I whispered. Thatcher pulled me into his arms, holding me like I was the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. "I will find you," he said fiercely. "I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what I have to do. I will find you, and we will be a family. I know. I love you. That will never change. I love you too. Always." I pulled away before I could change my mind, grabbed my suitcase, walked out the door without looking back because if I did, I'd break. The elevator ride down was the longest of my life. 42 floors, each one taking me further from the man I loved and the life we'd planned. The cab driver helped with my suitcase, asked where I was headed. "Airport," I said. I took almost nothing from our life together. Left behind the designer clothes he'd bought me, the jewelry, every material thing that connected me to him. Kept only what was essential, my credentials, my identity documents, the tiny ultrasound photo that showed the life growing inside me. As the cab pulled away from the building, I let myself look back once. Saw him standing at the penthouse window, 42 floors up, watching me leave. Then I turned forward and didn't look back again. Thatcher Edmund Holloway married Juliet Ashford on a cold January morning, 3 days before his 35th birthday. The cathedral was packed. 500 guests, every one of them from the right families, the right circles, the right world. The world I'd never belonged to. Juliet looked beautiful in a dress that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. Elegant, sophisticated, exactly the kind of woman who was supposed to marry a man like Thatcher. Thatcher stood at the altar in his perfect tuxedo, his mismatched eyes hollow, his smile practiced and empty. The ceremony was everything a society wedding should be. Traditional, elegant, photographed for magazines that would run spreads about the perfect union of two great families. But I didn't see it in person. I was 300 miles away, 7 months pregnant, living in a studio apartment in a city where nobody knew my name, working night shifts at a small hospital under my maiden name, Evangeline Morrison, not Evangeline, anything that connected to Thatcher Holloway. I watched the live stream on my phone. The cathedral had streaming for guests who couldn't attend. Of course it did, because everything in that world was documented, publicized, perfect. I watched the man I loved pledge his life to someone else, watched him say the vows we should have been saying to each other, watched him slip a ring on her finger, kiss her chastely, turn to face the crowd as Mr. and Mrs. Thatcher Holloway. The marriage satisfied the will's terms. Within weeks, Prescott's challenge was formally dismissed. The board of directors issued a statement congratulating Thatcher on his marriage and expressing their confidence in the continued stewardship of the foundation. Everything Vivian had wanted was secured. The legacy was safe, the foundation was protected, and Thatcher's heart turned to stone. I knew because Marlowe sent me one message, just one, to a burner phone I'd bought specifically for emergencies. A single text that said, "He's functioning, he's surviving, he's not living." Then I threw the burner phone away, eliminating even that tenuous connection. 300 miles away, I sat in my cheap apartment, one room with a bathroom the size of a closet and a kitchenette that barely fit a hot plate and mini-fridge. My view was of a brick wall. My furniture was thrift store finds and things I'd pulled from the curb. And I felt the baby kick. Strong, insistent movements that reminded me this was real. That the sacrifice we'd made mattered, that somewhere in all this pain, there was purpose. I turned off my phone and cried until I couldn't breathe. Both of us destroyed in different cities. Both of us surviving but not living. Both of us waiting for a day that might never come. The day when enough time had passed, when enough had been secured, when it was finally safe for him to find us. If he could find us. If he even still wanted to. 5 years later, Thatcher's marriage to Juliet was exactly what they'd promised it would be. Strategic, bloodless, utterly empty. They maintained separate wings of their mansion, appeared together for foundation events, charity galas, the occasional interview. To the outside world, they were the perfect power couple. The tabloids called them relationship goals. Posted photos of them at museum openings and society functions, always looking elegant, always perfectly coordinated. None of those photographers knew, they barely spoke. After the first year, they stopped sharing a bedroom entirely. Juliet had her own life, a thriving art curation career, close friends, lovers she was discreet about but didn't hide from Thatcher. She'd kept her word, didn't expect love, didn't push for intimacy beyond what was necessary. The heir requirement had been satisfied through artificial insemination, clinical, efficient. Exactly what Vivienne's will required, but nothing more. Juliet had given birth to a daughter named Charlotte 18 months after the wedding. A beautiful child with Juliet's blonde hair and the Holloway eyes. One green, one hazel. Thatcher loved Charlotte in his own distant way, made sure she was cared for, provided for, given every advantage. But he couldn't connect with her the way a father should. Every time he looked at her, he saw the life he'd sacrificed, the child he'd never met, the woman he'd lost. 2 years into the marriage, Juliet found Thatcher drunk in the study, staring at a photo he kept hidden in his desk drawer. "You're still in love with her," she said. Not a question. He didn't deny it. Thatcher hired the best private investigators money could buy. They searched for Evangeline Morrison, Evangeline Williams, any variation of her name combined with nursing credentials in any state. They looked for credit card trails, social media accounts, utility bills, rental agreements. She'd vanished like smoke. No digital footprint, no paper trail, no whispers in nursing circles about a talented new hire who matched her description. She'd gone completely off the grid in a way that seemed impossible in the modern world. But she'd done it. Somehow, she'd erased herself completely. The years passed. Thatcher grew colder, more ruthless in business, threw himself into foundation work, expanding their reach, helping more families, building new programs. The foundation had never been stronger, never helped more people. At night, alone in his wing of the mansion, he'd pull out the ultrasound photo, the only proof that Evangeline had been real, that their baby had existed, that the whole thing wasn't some fever dream. Somewhere out there was his child, 5 years old now, walking, talking, learning about the world, growing up without a father, without even knowing Thatcher existed. The thought was a knife that never stopped twisting. He'd made the right choice. He knew that, intellectually. The foundation thrived. Thousands of families had been helped, because he'd made the sacrifice Vivienne demanded. But knowing you made the right choice doesn't make it hurt less. 3 months ago, Thatcher and Juliet finally filed for divorce. It was mutual, amicable, handled with the same clinical efficiency as everything else in their marriage. Juliet was seeing a museum director who made her laugh, who looked at her like she was precious. She deserved that. Deserved someone who could actually love her. "What will you do?" she asked him as their lawyers finalized the paperwork. "Find her," Thatcher said. "If she's still out there. If she'll even speak to me after all this time." Juliet smiled sadly. "I hope you do. You deserve to be happy, Thatcher. We both do." The divorce would be final in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, and then he'd tear the world apart looking for Evangeline. He'd already retained new investigators, prepared to spend whatever it took, go wherever he needed. He had no idea if she'd kept the baby, no idea if she'd moved on, found someone else, built a life that didn't include him, no idea if she'd even want to be found. But he had to try. 5 years was long enough to satisfy any challenge to the will, long enough that Prescott couldn't claim fraud or manipulation, long enough that the foundation was secure and thriving, long enough for Thatcher to finally keep the promise he'd made. It was a Tuesday in April when everything changed. Thatcher was in Boston for a foundation site visit, a new housing complex they'd funded, providing affordable homes for low-income families. The tour ran longer than expected. He'd skipped lunch, was starving, needed to grab something before his flight back. He ducked into a Whole Foods near the project site. Nothing fancy, just the closest place to grab food quickly. The produce section was crowded. He grabbed a basket, started absently picking through apples, his mind still half on the housing numbers, the budget projections, the expansion plans. Then he heard it, a child's laugh, pure and bright and joyful. The kind of sound that cuts through everything else. He looked up. 10 feet away stood a little boy, maybe 5 years old, biracial, with a wild mop of curls that looked like they'd never been successfully tamed. The child was stretching on his tiptoes, trying to reach a cereal box on a shelf too high for him. "Mom!" The boy called toward the next aisle. "I can't reach the honey nut." A woman's voice, muffled by distance. "Ask nicely, someone might help." The boy turned, scanning for a helpful adult, and Thatcher's heart stopped. The child had heterochromia, one eye green, one hazel, exactly like Thatcher's eyes, exactly like every Holay firstborn for 5 generations. The boy noticed Thatcher staring. "Mister, could you help me?" Thatcher couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His hands were shaking so badly he had to set down his basket before he dropped it. This couldn't be real, couldn't be happening. 5 years of searching, of wondering, of hoping, and he'd found them in a grocery store produce section. "Please?" The boy tried again, his voice polite but puzzled by the strange man frozen in place. On autopilot, Thatcher grabbed the cereal box and handed it down. His hands were still shaking. The boy's face split into a grin, a smile that cracked Thatcher's chest open and made it impossible to breathe. "Thanks. Hey!" The child peered up at him with those mismatched eyes. "Your eyes are like mine. Mom says mine are special because they're different colors. She says it means I'm Orion." The voice hit Thatcher like a bullet to the chest. He turned slowly, terrified that if he moved too fast, this would all disappear like a dream. And there she was. Evangeline, older, hair shorter, cut to her shoulders instead of the long waves he remembered. Frame thinner, like she'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many double shifts, too many nights of too little sleep. But unmistakably, impossibly, devastatingly, her. She stood frozen in the aisle, a basket of groceries hanging from nerveless fingers. The color drained from her face so fast, Thatcher worried she might pass out. 3 seconds. They stared at each other across the fluorescent-lit grocery store for 3 endless seconds. Everything else, the other shoppers, the background music, the hum of refrigeration units, all of it disappeared. There was only her, only the son he'd never met. Only 5 years of searching and longing and wondering condensed into this single impossible moment. Then Evangeline's basket fell from her hands. Oranges rolled everywhere, bouncing across the floor. A jar of pasta sauce shattered, sending red sauce and glass across the tiles. She grabbed Orion's hand. "We need to go." "But Mom, the mess." "Now, baby, now." Her voice was shaking, panic flooding her features. She turned and ran, dragging Orion behind her, weaving between shopping carts and other customers, heading for the exit. And Thatcher, after 5 years of searching, of aching, of wondering if he'd ever see her again, finally moved. He ran after them. 5 years of searching, 5 years of wondering if his child even existed, if Evangeline was alive, if he'd ever get a chance to make things right. And now, in a grocery store produce section in Boston, Thatcher Holay has found them. His son, a boy named Orion with his eyes and her smile and 5 years of life Thatcher missed. And Evangeline, running, again. But this time, Thatcher isn't letting her go. What happens in that parking lot? What has Evangeline's life been like for 5 years? And when Thatcher finally catches up to her, will she run again? Or will she finally tell him the truth about why she stayed away? Part 2 begins with the confrontation that changes everything. And I promise you, nothing will ever be the same. Subscribe now so you don't miss Part 2. Hit that notification bell, because this story is about to get even more emotional. Drop a comment, Team Evangeline or Team Thatcher. Who was right? Who was wrong? Let me know below. See you in Part 2, where the real reckoning begins. When we left off, Thatcher... Let's get into it. Thatcher's legs moved before his brain could catch up. He dodged around shopping carts, nearly knocked over an elderly woman with an apologetic shout, pushed through the automatic doors that weren't opening fast enough. The parking lot was massive, rows and rows of cars glinting in the April sun. For a terrifying second, he thought he'd lost them. Then he spotted her, halfway across the lot, still dragging Orion behind her, moving fast toward the far corner where the older, cheaper cars were parked. "Evangeline!" His voice cracked. "Stop, please!" She didn't slow down. If anything, she moved faster. But Orion was struggling now. His little legs couldn't keep up with her pace. He stumbled, nearly fell, and that's what finally made her stop. She spun around, placing herself between Thatcher and the boy. Protective, a mama bear, standing between a threat and her cub. Thatcher skidded to a halt about 10 feet away, hands raised, palms out, non-threatening. He didn't want to spook her, didn't want to give her any reason to run again. "Don't," she said, her voice shaking. "Don't do this here." He stared at her. 5 years. 5 years of searching and wondering and hoping. And here she was, older, thinner, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness and everything to do with carrying too much weight for too long. But his eyes kept darting to Orion. The boy was beautiful. That was Thatcher's first coherent thought. This child, his child, was absolutely beautiful. Those curls, wild and defiant, catching the sunlight, golden brown skin, a perfect blend of both his parents. Small for 5 or maybe average, Thatcher had no frame of reference for what 5-year-olds were supposed to look like. And those eyes, one green, one hazel. The Holay eyes that had been passed down through 5 generations. The genetic marker that couldn't be faked, couldn't be coincidence. Thatcher's knees nearly buckled. "Is he mine?" The words came out hoarse. "Please, I need to hear you say it." Orion tugged on Evangeline's sleeve. "Mom, who is this?" The word mom hit Thatcher like a physical blow. This child called her mom had a whole vocabulary, a whole personality, 5 years of existence that Thatcher knew nothing about. Evangeline's eyes closed. A single tear tracked down her cheek. "Not here," she said quietly. "Not like this. If you want to talk, really talk, meet me tomorrow. But you don't get to blow up our lives in a grocery store parking lot." "Our lives?" Thatcher's voice rose. "He's my son. You disappeared for 5 years with my son. You married someone else." She was shouting now, all the pain and anger of 5 years erupting. "You stood in a cathedral and married another woman 3 months after I left. Because you told me to." Orion started crying, not loud, dramatic sobs. Soft, confused tears that were somehow worse. His small face crumpled, lower lip trembling, those mismatched eyes, Thatcher's eyes, filling with water. "Mommy?" His voice was so small. Everything stopped. Evangeline immediately dropped to her knees, pulling Orion close, wrapping her arms around him like she could shield him from the world. "It's okay, baby," she murmured, kissing his forehead, his cheeks, anywhere she could reach. "It's okay. Mommy's sorry for yelling. Mommy's so sorry." Thatcher felt like he'd been punched in the chest, watching her comfort their son, watching the practiced ease of it, the way Orion immediately relaxed into her embrace, the way she knew exactly how to soothe him. 5 years of moments like this. 5 years of scraped knees and bad dreams and everyday comfort. And Thatcher had missed all of it. Evangeline looked up at him over Orion's head. Her expression was fury and devastation mixed together in equal measure. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice tight. 2 p.m. Boston Common, the bridge by the public garden. Come alone or don't come at all. She scooped Orion into her arms. He was big for that, probably too heavy for her to carry comfortably, but she did it anyway. Held him against her chest, his face buried in her neck. Started walking toward a beat-up Honda Civic in the corner. The car was at least 15 years old, with rust spots along the bottom and a crack in the windshield. This was what she'd been driving. What she'd been living with while he'd had penthouses and private drivers. Thatcher watched her buckle Orion into a car seat in the back, watched her hands shake as she adjusted the straps, making sure they were secure, watched her pause for just a moment, her forehead resting against the doorframe, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Then she straightened, wiped her face, got into the driver's seat. Her hands were still shaking when they gripped the steering wheel. He could see them trembling from where he stood. The car started with a concerning rattling sound. She pulled out of the parking space without looking at him again, drove away with their son buckled safely in the back, leaving Thatcher standing alone in the parking lot. He stood there for a long time after they disappeared from view. Just stood there, body trembling with emotions he couldn't name, couldn't process, couldn't begin to organize into something coherent. He has a son. The thought kept cycling through his mind on repeat. He has a son named Orion, with his eyes and her smile, and 5 years of life that Thatcher missed completely. The rage came first, white hot and consuming, burning through his chest like acid. She'd kept this from him, had raised their child alone, let him believe he'd lost everything, disappeared so completely he'd thought he'd never find her. Then came the grief. Crushing, suffocating grief for everything he'd lost. First words, first steps, 5 years of bedtime stories and morning cuddles and all the tiny moments that made up a childhood. And then something else. Something he couldn't quite name but felt like hope and terror mixed together. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and called Marlo. She answered on the first ring. "Did you find them?" "Cancel everything tomorrow." His voice didn't sound like his own. Everything. All meetings, all calls, everything. "Thatcher, what happened?" "I found them. I found her. I found..." He couldn't say it. Couldn't make it real by speaking it aloud. "I need you to find me the best family lawyer in Boston. Someone who specializes in custody cases. I want them on standby." There was a pause. "Are you sure that's the right move?" "I don't know what the right move is." He was shouting now, not caring who heard. "I don't know anything except that I just met my 5-year-old son in a grocery store parking lot and then watched him drive away crying. So yes, I want a lawyer on standby in case I need one." Even as he said it, he knew lawyers weren't the answer. Lawyers were what you used when you wanted to win, to dominate, to force an outcome through legal maneuvering. But this wasn't a business negotiation. This was his son, the woman he loved. A family that had been shattered 5 years ago and might never be whole again. There was only one way forward, through the pain, through the conversation he didn't want to have, but desperately needed, through whatever truth Evangeline had to tell him. "I'll have names for you within the hour," Marlo said quietly. "But Thatcher, maybe don't lead with lawyers. Maybe lead with listening." She hung up before he could respond. Evangeline held it together until she got Orion home. Held it together through the drive, even though her hands were shaking so badly she nearly ran a red light. Held it together through unlocking their apartment door, through getting him a snack, through turning on his favorite show. "Mommy, why were you and that man yelling?" Orion asked around a mouthful of goldfish crackers. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, baby. It wasn't about you. You didn't do anything wrong." "But he had eyes like me." Her heart stopped. "You noticed that?" "Yeah. He said I could have the cereal. He was nice." Orion's face scrunched up in thought. Was that my daddy? The question she'd been dreading for 5 years. "We'll talk about it tomorrow, okay? Right now, I need you to watch your show while Mummy makes dinner." She escaped to the kitchen, if you could call the tiny kitchenette a kitchen, and braced her hands on the counter. The apartment was small, one bedroom that Orion had, while she slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. The building was old, the neighbors were loud, but it was clean and safe and affordable on a nurse's salary. It was all she could manage, and now Thatcher had seen it, had seen the rust bucket car and the cheap apartment and the life she'd cobbled together from nothing. That night, she read Orion 3 extra bedtime stories. He requested the dinosaur book twice, then the one about the dragon who was afraid of knights. She read them in the voices he loved, doing all the sound effects, making him giggle even though she felt like she was dying inside. "Mummy, will I see the man with the special eyes again?" he asked as she tucked him in. "Maybe, baby, maybe. I hope so." He seemed sad, like he needed a hug. Out of the mouths of children, Orion had seen in 3 seconds what Evangeline had been trying to deny, that Thatcher was broken, that he'd been broken for a long time. "Get some sleep," she whispered. kissing his forehead. Sweet dreams about dinosaurs, okay? Okay. Love you, Mummy. Love you too, baby. So much. She stayed in his room until his breathing evened out, until she was sure he was deeply asleep. Then she went to the living room, sat on the floor with her back against the couch, and finally let herself fall apart. 5 years. 5 years of building this life, of convincing herself she'd done the right thing. That walking away had been the noble choice, the selfless choice, the choice that protected everyone. 3 seconds in a grocery store had torn it all down. She'd known this moment might come eventually, had played out scenarios in her head during sleepless nights, imagined different ways it could happen, different things she might say, but she'd imagined being stronger, more composed, having all her arguments lined up and ready. She'd also imagined that Thatcher would have moved on by now, that 5 years would have dulled whatever he'd felt for her, that he'd have built a real life with Juliet, maybe even been happy. She hadn't imagined the look on his face when he saw Orion, like he was witnessing a miracle and a murder at the same time, like his heart was being ripped out of his chest while simultaneously being given everything he'd ever wanted. Her phone buzzed. She'd thrown it on the couch when they got home, hadn't looked at it since. Now she pulled it down, saw a message from an unknown number. I'm sorry for how that happened. But I'm not sorry I found you. Tomorrow we talk. Really talk, please, too. She stared at the message until her vision blurred. How did he even get her number? But of course, Thatcher Holay had resources she couldn't begin to compete with. If he wanted to find her number, her address, every detail of her life for the past 5 years, he could. The thought terrified her. She should run again, pack up Orion tonight while he slept, load the car, drive until they hit another state, change her name again, get new credentials, start over somewhere new. She'd done it before. She could do it again. But God, she was so tired of running, tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of jumping every time someone looked at her too long, tired of building a life on foundations of secrets and fear. And Orion deserved better, deserved to know his father, if his father wanted to know him, deserved stability instead of constantly being uprooted, deserved a mother who wasn't perpetually terrified of being found. Her fingers hovered over the phone keyboard for a long time before she finally typed, "Tomorrow, but then you leave us alone." The response came immediately. He must have been staring at his phone, waiting. "I can't promise that. He's my son." The words hit like a slap, like a threat, like a promise. She threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. Probably cracked the screen. She couldn't afford to replace it, but she didn't care. Then she pulled her knees to her chest and cried until dawn broke through the thin curtains, painting everything in shades of grey that matched exactly how she felt. Thatcher lay on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. He'd checked into the Four Seasons after leaving the grocery store. Hadn't even considered going back to his house in Connecticut. Couldn't imagine being that far away from them. His phone showed 11:30. He'd been lying here for 4 hours, cycling through the same emotions on repeat. Rage, heartbreak, a desperate, aching need to understand why. Why had she left without telling him about Orion? Why had she raised their son alone when he'd been searching for her? Why had she let him believe he'd lost everything? He kept imagining Orion's life, the moments he'd missed. Was Mama really his first word, or had there been something before? Had he been an easy baby or difficult? What did his cry sound like? His laugh? When did he take his first steps? Was it in that tiny apartment, or somewhere else? Had Evangeline been alone, or had someone been there to share the moment? What were his favorite foods? His favorite toys? Did he have friends? Was he happy? The questions were endless. 5 years of questions with no answers. And what about Evangeline? What had her life been like? He'd seen the apartment building when he'd looked up her address. Cheap, old, in a neighborhood that made his security detail nervous. Seen the car that looked like it might not pass inspection. Had she struggled? Of course she had. She was a nurse. They didn't make enough to live comfortably in most cities, especially single mothers. Had she been scared? Lonely? Did she ever pick up the phone to call him and then stop herself? Did she ever regret leaving? By 3 in the morning, The rage had burned itself out. What remained was grief and a bone-deep need to understand. Not to punish, not to win, but to understand. He pulled out his laptop and did what he should have done hours ago, started researching Evangeline's life. Her apartment was in a building built in the 1960s, 40 units, mixed working-class neighborhood. Her car was registered in Massachusetts, a 2008 Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on it. She worked at Boston General Hospital, not County General anymore. She'd had to get new credentials in Massachusetts when she moved. The hospital's website showed her in a staff photo, looking professional and exhausted. Her life was small, constrained, built around work and Orion and nothing else. While he'd had penthouses and private drivers and everything money could buy, the guilt was crushing. But beneath it, something else, a realization that came slowly as dawn approached. She hadn't left because she stopped loving him. She'd left because she loved him too much. Because those photos of him with Juliet, the ones his father-in-law had orchestrated, the honeymoon that had been pure PR, had convinced her she'd been wrong, that he'd moved on, that their child would be an unwanted complication. So she'd done what she thought was right. Protected Orion. Protected Thatcher. Protected herself from the pain of watching him build a life with someone else. It was stupid and noble and heartbreaking all at once. By the time the sun rose, Thatcher had made a decision. Tomorrow, he'd listen, really listen. Before reacting, before demanding, before doing anything else, he'd listen to her side, to all of it. And then maybe, just maybe, they could figure out where to go from there. Thatcher arrived at Boston Common 30 minutes early. He couldn't help himself, couldn't sit in the hotel room for another second, knowing that in a few hours, he'd see her again, talk to her. Maybe, if he was very lucky and very careful, start to rebuild something from the wreckage of the past 5 years. The park was beautiful in mid-April. Trees budding, flowers beginning to bloom, people out enjoying the spring weather, families with children, couples holding hands, normal people living normal lives. He found the bridge by the public garden and stood there, watching the swan boats glide across the pond, trying to organize his thoughts into something coherent. What did he want from this conversation? Answers, obviously. But more than that, he wanted to understand, wanted to know Evangeline's life, Orion's life, everything he'd missed. And beneath all of it, though he barely let himself acknowledge it, he wanted them, wanted his family, wanted a chance to be the father he should have been from the beginning. At 1:58, he saw her walking across the bridge. She was alone. No Orion. She'd left him with someone. A friend, she'd said. Someone she trusted. The thought of her having friends, having a life here that he knew nothing about, stung more than it should have. She stopped about 10 feet away, arms crossed protectively across her chest. Defensive posture, ready to bolt if he said the wrong thing. "Where's Orion?" he asked. "With a friend," Evangeline said, her voice flat. "A good friend who won't let you send investigators to harass her." So, she knew he had resources, knew he could find out anything he wanted about her life. The knowledge was a weapon she was wielding carefully. "You get 1 hour," she continued. "Then I go back to my son, and you go back to your life." "Our son?" The correction came automatically. Her jaw tightened. "Genetically, yes. In every other way that matters, he's mine. You don't get to claim him just because you share DNA." The words hit like punches, each one designed to hurt, to push him away, to maintain the distance she'd built over 5 years. "You didn't give me a choice," Thatcher said, forcing his voice to stay level. "Neither did you." And there it was, the real conversation starting, not polite, not careful, but raw and honest, and full of 5 years of pain. "I did exactly what you told me to do," Thatcher continued. "I married Juliet. I secured the foundation. I played the role you said I needed to play. And you disappeared. You took my child and vanished without a trace. You mean I removed the scandal from your perfect life?" Her composure was cracking now, the careful control slipping. I removed the inconvenient nurse and her inconvenient baby so you could marry the right kind of woman and inherit your billions in peace. That's not what happened, and you know it. Do I? Because from where I was standing, it looked exactly like that. Evangeline's voice rose, years of buried pain finally erupting. You want to know what my life was like? Fine, let me tell you. She started pacing, unable to stand still under the weight of everything she'd been carrying. I worked double shifts while 7 months pregnant because I needed to save money before the baby came. I gave birth in a county hospital with only my neighbor, a woman I barely knew, to hold my hand because everyone else I knew was 300 miles away and I couldn't tell them where I was. Thatcher opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off. I'm not finished. I stayed up all night with a colicky baby who screamed for hours, trying to keep him quiet so I wouldn't get evicted for noise complaints. I went back to work 6 weeks, postpartum, because I couldn't afford to take more time off. I studied for my Massachusetts nursing certification with a 3-month-old strapped to my chest because I couldn't afford childcare. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. I did what I had to do because you made your choice. You chose the foundation. You chose Juliet. You chose your grandmother's legacy over us. And I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because it's the truth. You made a choice, and I made one too. I chose to raise our son without the shadow of your other life hanging over us. Because you told me to. Thatcher's voice rose to match hers. Several people in the park turned to look. He didn't care. You stood in my penthouse and told me to marry her. You said you'd wait. You promised we'd find our way back to each other. Evangeline's bitter laugh cut through the air like glass. That was before I realized how stupid I was being. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, scrolled through her photos, found what she was looking for, turned the screen toward him. It was a screenshot of a magazine spread, People magazine from 5 years ago. Thatcher and Juliet on a yacht in the Mediterranean, supposedly on their honeymoon. He remembered that trip. Remembered how much he'd hated every second of it. You were smiling, Evangeline said, her voice breaking. Actually smiling. I was 3 months postpartum, sitting in a studio apartment that smelled like mildew, nursing our son at 3 in the morning, and I made the mistake of Googling you, of seeing how you were doing. She zoomed in on the photo, on Juliet wearing a necklace. That's Vivian's necklace, Evangeline continued. The one she always said was meant for the woman you'd marry, the one that had been in your family for 4 generations. And there was Juliet, wearing it, looking beautiful and happy and perfect. Thatcher's stomach dropped. He'd forgotten about that necklace. Camden had insisted Juliet wear it for the photos, said it would look good for the press. I realized in that moment how stupid I'd been, Evangeline said, tears streaming down her face now. I'd convinced myself you were suffering, that you were only doing this for the foundation, that you were miserable. But you looked happy. You looked like a man on his honeymoon with the woman he loved. I wasn't, Thatcher said, his voice breaking. God, Evangeline, I wasn't. That whole honeymoon was a PR stunt. Camden set it up, said we needed to look happy for the press to show the board that the marriage was real. Well, I didn't know that. She was shouting now. I didn't know anything because I'd cut myself off completely, just like we agreed. I had no way of knowing what was real and what was performance. All I had were those photos and my imagination, and they told me I'd made a terrible mistake. What mistake? Believing you'd come back for me. The words tore out of her. Believing that you'd actually choose me eventually, that I was worth choosing. She sank onto the bridge railing, suddenly exhausted. Every time I thought about calling you, I remembered those photos. Remembered that you had a wife, that I would be the other woman, that our baby would be the scandal that destroyed everything you'd sacrificed for. So you just decided I didn't deserve to know? Thatcher's voice was raw. Didn't deserve to meet my son? To have any say in his life? I decided he deserved a mother who was present. She stood again, facing him fully. A mother who wasn't torn apart watching the man she loved build a life with someone else. A mother who could focus on him completely instead of being destroyed by grief and jealousy and the knowledge that she'd given up everything for nothing. The honesty was brutal, cutting, exactly what they both needed. I made a choice, Evangeline continued, her voice softer now but no less intense. Maybe it was the wrong one. Maybe I should have called. Maybe I should have trusted that you meant what you said. But I made it out of love, Thatcher. Not cruelty, not revenge, love. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking small and vulnerable. I thought I was protecting him, protecting you, protecting myself. I thought I was doing the right thing. Thatcher closed the distance between them, slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted. She didn't. You should have trusted me, he said quietly. Should have called. Should have given me a chance. I spent 5 years searching for you. 5 years hoping that maybe, somehow, I'd find you again. 5 years of, while married to another woman, she interrupted. A marriage that was over in every way that mattered after 6 months. His voice rose again. Evangeline, Juliet and I were roommates at best. She had her life, I had mine. We fulfilled the will's requirements and then lived completely separate lives. We barely spoke. He pulled out his phone, found the documents his lawyer had sent, showed them to her. Divorce decree, finalized 3 weeks ago. I'm free, he said. Have been for 3 weeks, and I was coming to find you. I'd already retained new investigators, was prepared to spend whatever it took, go wherever I needed to. I was going to turn the world upside down until I found you. Evangeline stared at the divorce documents on his phone screen. The date jumped out at her. 3 weeks ago. He'd been divorced for 3 weeks, and she'd had no idea. I didn't know, she whispered. I stopped looking, stopped following anything about you because it hurt too much. I couldn't see photos of you and Juliet at events, couldn't read articles about the perfect power couple, so I just stopped. Cut myself off completely. She looked up at him, and her face was crumpling. I didn't know you were divorced. Didn't know you were coming to find us. Didn't know. Then we're both idiots, Thatcher said, and despite everything, there was almost a laugh in his voice. We're both idiots who made impossible choices in an impossible situation and hurt each other trying to do the right thing. The fight was draining out of both of them now, leaving only exhaustion and grief and the terrible weight of everything they'd lost. I'm not angry anymore, Thatcher continued, his voice gentling. I thought I would be. Spent all night cycling through rage and hurt and betrayal, but standing here listening to you, understanding what your life was like, I'm just heartbroken. He had to pause, swallow hard against the emotion threatening to choke him, because I missed everything. First words, first steps, 5 years of bedtime stories and skinned knees and birthday parties, and he couldn't continue. The grief was too much. Evangeline wiped her eyes, then did something Thatcher didn't expect. She started talking about Orion. His first word was, Mama, she said softly. At 8 months, I was feeding him mashed bananas and he just looked up at me and said it clear as day. Thatcher's breath caught. He took his first steps at 11 months, she continued. We were at the park. There's this small park near our apartment. He saw a dog and just took off running toward it. Well, toddling, but he was so determined. I nearly had a heart attack thinking he'd faceplant, but he made it. She smiled a little at the memory. He has nightmares sometimes, about dragons, but he also loves dinosaurs, so we read dinosaur books to fight the dragons. It actually works. He's brilliant, she said, and there was pride in her voice. Taught himself to count to 20 by the time he was 3, knows all his letters, asks questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do birds sleep? Why do people have different colored eyes? That last one made Thatcher's chest ache. He asks about his father sometimes, Evangeline admitted, her voice dropping. I told him that his daddy loved him very much, but had important work to do, that someday, maybe, they'd meet. I didn't want him to think you didn't want him. Thatcher's vision blurred. Thank you for that. He's kind, she continued. So kind it breaks my heart sometimes. Shares his toys with other kids even when he doesn't want to. Cries when he sees hurt animals. Wants to be a veterinarian when he grows up. She looked at Thatcher directly. He's the best thing I ever did, the best part of me, and I know I should have told you, should have given you a chance to know him from the beginning, but I was scared and hurt and convinced I was doing the right thing. Someday is now, Thatcher said. Please, let me know him. Let me be his father. I'm not asking to take him from you, I would never do that, but I'm asking for a chance to be part of his life, part of both your lives. Evangeline shook her head. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I'm terrified. The word burst out of her. I'm terrified he'll love you more because you can give him things I can't. Private schools and trips to places I've only seen in pictures and a life I could never provide. I'm terrified you'll decide I'm not a fit mother and take him away. I'm terrified that a judge will look at your money and your power and my... She gestured helplessly at herself. My one-bedroom apartment and my 15-year-old car and my life that's held together with duct tape and prayer, and decide that of course Orion should be with you. What judge wouldn't give you custody? The fear in her voice was real and devastating. Is that what you think? Thatcher's heart shattered. That I'd take him from you? I don't know what to think anymore. He took her hands. She flinched, but didn't pull away. Evangeline, look at me, please. She did, her eyes red and raw and full of tears. I won't take Orion from you, Thatcher said, holding her gaze. I won't weaponize lawyers or money or anything else. You're his mother. You've been there for every moment I missed. You've loved him and raised him and done everything right. I could never repay that. Would never try to take that away from you. But he's my son too, Thatcher continued, and I'm begging you for a chance to know him, whatever that looks like, however slow it needs to go. Just, please, don't shut me out. Don't make me miss the next 5 years too. Evangeline searched his face for a long moment, looking for lies, for manipulation, for anything that would confirm her fears. She didn't find it. If you hurt him, she started. I won't. I swear on everything I have, I won't hurt him. And if he doesn't want a relationship with you, if he's not ready, if it's too much too fast, then I'll wait, Thatcher said. I'll wait as long as it takes. I've gotten very good at waiting. The words hung between them, a promise and a plea, and the fragile beginning of something that might eventually become forgiveness. Evangeline pulled her hands away, wrapped her arms around herself again. I need time, she said, to process this, to figure out how to tell Orion, to understand what this means for us. Us? Thatcher's voice was carefully neutral, but hope flared in his chest. You and me, she clarified. Kyo parents, that's all we can be right now. Maybe that's all we'll ever be. I don't know. But Orion deserves a father, and you deserve to know your son. So we figure out how to make that work. It wasn't everything Thatcher wanted, but it was something. A crack in the wall she'd built. A beginning. Okay, he said. Whatever you need, whatever timeline works for you, I'll follow your lead. She nodded, not quite believing him, but willing to try. I need to go, she said. My friend can only watch Orion for another hour. Can the first... Oh, Thatcher hesitated. Can I give you my number? My real number, not whatever you got yesterday. So we can talk. About Orion. About logistics. She considered, then pulled out her phone. They exchanged numbers. Official connection established after 5 years of silence. I'll call you, she said. In a few days, when I've figured out how to explain this to a 5-year-old. Thank you. She started to walk away, then paused. Turned back. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I never stopped loving you. Not once in 5 years. I just convinced myself that love wasn't enough. Then she walked away, leaving Thatcher standing on the bridge with tears streaming down his face and hope kindling in his chest for the first time in 5 years. 2 days after the bridge conversation, Evangeline sat on the floor of Orion's room, surrounded by dinosaur toys. She'd spent the past 48 hours trying to figure out how to explain this to a 5-year-old. How do you tell a child that the man from the grocery store, the one who'd made Mommy yell and cry, was someone important, someone who wanted to be part of his life? Orion, baby, come sit with me for a minute. He looked up from the elaborate scene he was creating with his plastic dinosaurs. Is it time for dinner? Not yet. I need to talk to you about something. He abandoned his toys and climbed into her lap, all elbows and knees and wild curls that tickled her chin. God, she loved him. Everything she'd done, every sacrifice, Every hard choice had been for him. Remember the man from the store, the one with eyes like yours? Orion nodded. He was nice. He got my cereal. He's someone very special, someone who's wanted to meet you for a long, long time. Orion tilted his head, thinking, then, with the directness only children possess, is he my daddy? Evangeline's breath caught. She shouldn't be surprised. Orion was brilliant, made connections other kids his age missed, but hearing him say it so plainly still knocked the air from her lungs. She shifted him so they were face to face, eye level. Yes, baby, he's your daddy, and he's wanted to meet you for a very, very long time. Orion's eyes went wide. Where was he? How do you explain adult complications to a child? How do you condense 5 years of impossible choices, sacrifices, and pain into something a 5-year-old can understand? He was doing important work, Evangeline said carefully, helping a lot of people who needed him, but now he's here, and he wants to know you, if that's okay with you. Orion considered this with the seriousness he brought to everything. His little face scrunched up in concentration. Does he like dinosaurs? The question was so unexpected, so perfectly Orion, that Evangeline nearly laughed. Of course, that would be his primary concern. Not why his father had been absent, not whether this would change everything, but whether this new person in his life appreciated dinosaurs. I think we should ask him, she said. Okay. Orion paused. Will I have to call him Daddy? You can call him whatever feels right. There's no rush, baby. We're just going to meet him and see how it goes, and if you want to leave at any time, we'll leave, I promise. And you'll be there? Every second. I won't leave your side unless you want me to. Orion nodded, then squirmed out of her lap to return to his dinosaurs. Subject apparently settled in his mind, crisis averted. Evangeline wished it felt that simple to her. They met at the Boston Children's Museum 2 days later. Evangeline had chosen it deliberately. Neutral ground, full of distractions, loud and chaotic enough that any awkwardness would be swallowed by the general noise. If things went badly, they could leave. If they went well, there were hours of activities to keep Orion occupied. Thatcher was already there when they arrived, standing near the entrance. He'd dressed down, jeans and a simple sweater instead of the tailored suits she was used to seeing him in. But he still carried that air of wealth and power like a second skin. Other parents did double takes as they passed, clearly recognizing him but too polite to stare. Orion grabbed Evangeline's hand tighter as they approached. Mummy, I'm scared, he whispered. Evangeline stopped, kneeling down to his level. It's okay to be scared, baby. This is a big thing and it's okay to have big feelings about it. But I promise he's nice. And if you want to leave at any time, even if we just got here, we'll leave, okay? Okay, Orion said, his voice small. They approached slowly. Thatcher saw them coming, and his entire face transformed. The careful neutrality he'd been maintaining melted into something raw and vulnerable and achingly hopeful. He crouched down immediately, making himself smaller, less intimidating, putting himself at Orion's eye level. Hi, Orion, he said, his voice gentle. I'm Thatcher. It's really nice to officially meet you. Orion half hid behind Evangeline's legs, peering around at this stranger who shared his unusual eyes. You have my eyes, he said, his voice muffled against Evangeline's jeans. Thatcher's laugh was wet, emotional. I do. It runs in our family. My grandmother had them too. She would have loved you so much. Is she dead? Orion! Evangeline gasped, mortified. I'm so sorry, he doesn't have a filter yet. But Thatcher was smiling, sad, but genuine. Yes, she passed away a long time ago, but she was wonderful. She taught me that the most important thing in life is to be kind and to fight for the people you love. Orion emerged a little from behind Evangeline's legs. Mummy says that too. Your mummy is very smart. Orion studied Thatcher for a long moment. Evangeline could see him processing, comparing, making his 5-year-old assessments. She held her breath, hoping he wouldn't say anything too brutally honest. Children had a way of cutting right to the heart of things. Then, do you like dinosaurs? Thatcher didn't miss a beat. I love dinosaurs. What's your favorite? And just like that, the ice broke. Ankylosaurus! Orion's whole face lit up. Because they have armor and a tail club, and nobody can eat them. That's a great choice. Very practical. Thatcher nodded seriously. Mine is the pteranodon. Orion's eyes widened in that particular way that meant he was about to deliver a correction. That's a pterosaur, not a dinosaur, he said with the disdain only a 5-year-old dinosaur expert could muster. Thatcher grinned. You're absolutely right. I stand corrected. Okay then, T-Rex. That's everybody's favorite. Orion rolled his eyes. But he was smiling now, warming up to this man who was willing to be educated. Then you'll have to teach me, Thatcher said. I clearly need to learn more about dinosaurs if I'm going to keep up with you. Orion looked up at Evangeline, seeking permission. Can we show him the dinosaur exhibit? Her throat was so tight she could barely speak. She nodded. Of course, baby. Orion turned back to Thatcher, and with the casualness that only children possess when doing something monumentally significant, took his hand. Small fingers wrapped around large ones. Thatcher's entire body went rigid. Evangeline watched his face, watched him struggle to maintain composure, watched tears fill his eyes, watched him bite his lip to keep from completely breaking down. He looked at her over Orion's head, mouthing, "Thank you." She nodded, not trusting her voice, her own eyes burning with tears. And then Orion was pulling him forward. Come on, the dinosaurs are upstairs. We have to see the T-Rex skeleton first, even if it's everybody's favorite, because it's really cool. They spent 3 hours at the museum. Thatcher let Orion lead completely, followed him from exhibit to exhibit, listening with absolute attention as Orion explained the difference between theropods and sauropods, corrected the museum's labels when he thought they were oversimplified, demonstrated how an ankylosaurus would use its tail club to defend itself. Evangeline hung back slightly, watching them together. Her son, so bright, so confident when talking about his passion, and his father, giving him the kind of focused attention that most adults couldn't maintain for 5 minutes. Thatcher asked questions, real questions, not the patronizing kind adults sometimes ask children. He wanted to know, wanted to understand, wanted to connect. Orion climbed on things he probably shouldn't have climbed on, explored with the fearlessness of a child who knew his parents were watching, and every few minutes he'd run back to Evangeline for reassurance, a quick hug, a "Mummy, did you see?" before returning to Thatcher. Building trust in the way children do, incrementally, instinctively, testing boundaries to see if they held. At one point, while Orion was distracted by the bubble exhibit, pressing buttons to make giant bubbles, laughing with pure joy, Evangeline found herself standing beside Thatcher. "You're doing really well," she murmured. Thatcher didn't take his eyes off Orion. "I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up." Welcome to parenting. That feeling never goes away. A massive bubble formed in front of Orion, reflecting rainbow colors across his delighted face. He reached out to touch it, and it popped, making him laugh harder. "He's incredible," Thatcher said softly. "He is. You raised an incredible kid, Evangeline." She finally looked at him, really looked, saw the wonder in his face, the grief for everything he'd missed, the desperate hope that this fragile beginning could become something more. "We raised him," she said quietly. "He has your curiosity, your intensity, the way he focuses on things he cares about. That's you, and his kindness. The way he wants everyone around him to be happy. That's you too." Thatcher's breath hitched. "Evangeline." "One step at a time, Thatcher. Today is about Orion. Everything else, we'll figure it out." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Right, one step at a time." Orion came running back, grabbing both their hands. "Come on, I want to show Dad the construction zone." Dad, not Daddy T, not Thatcher. Dad. The word hung in the air between them. Orion didn't seem to notice the significance, already pulling them toward the next exhibit. But Thatcher stopped walking, rooted to the spot. "Did he just—" "Yeah," Evangeline whispered. "He did." Thatcher's face crumpled. He looked like he might fall apart right there in the middle of the museum. "Come on!" Orion called back, impatient. "Dad, you're slow." Thatcher let Orion pull him forward, but Evangeline could see him struggling, see the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. When they reached the construction zone, a hands-on exhibit where kids could build with foam blocks and plastic tools, Orion immediately dove in, joining other children in building an elaborate structure. "I need a minute," Thatcher said, his voice strained. "Bathroom is around the corner," Evangeline said gently. He nodded and walked away quickly. Evangeline kept one eye on Orion while watching Thatcher disappear around the corner. She gave him 5 minutes, then 10. When he came back, his eyes were red but clear. He'd splashed water on his face, pulled himself together. "Sorry," he said. "Don't be. He called you Dad. That's huge." "I didn't think." Thatcher stopped, started again. "I thought it would take months, years maybe, for him to feel comfortable enough to." Kids are resilient and perceptive. He can feel that you care, that you're trying. That's what matters to him. They watched Orion for a while. He was showing another kid how to make an arch that wouldn't fall down, patient and encouraging. "He's going to be okay," Evangeline said. "Better than okay. He's going to thrive. Because of you. Because you gave him a stable foundation even when everything else was chaos." She shook her head. "Because of us. From now on, it's because of us." Over the next 3 weeks, they developed a routine. Thatcher came to Boston every weekend. Sometimes they did activities, museums, parks, the aquarium where Orion was fascinated by the sharks. Sometimes they just hung out at Evangeline's tiny apartment, the three of them squeezed onto her worn couch, watching animated movies about talking animals and magical adventures. Thatcher would sit on the floor playing with Orion's dinosaur collection, helping him set up elaborate scenes. A T-Rex hunting a herd of Triceratops, an Ankylosaurus defending its territory, pterosaurs soaring overhead, even though they weren't technically dinosaurs. He learned the rules of Orion's imaginary world, which dinosaurs were friends, which were enemies, which ones had special powers that the museum didn't know about. And somewhere in the second week, Orion started calling him Daddy T. To differentiate, Evangeline realized. To have a name that was his own creation, that felt safe and familiar. The first time he said it, Thatcher excused himself to the bathroom, came back 10 minutes later with red eyes and a wobbly smile. Evangeline didn't comment, just squeezed his hand briefly before returning to the movie they'd been watching. Slowly, painfully, Thatcher and Evangeline learned to be around each other again. It wasn't easy. There was too much history, too much hurt. Every conversation had landmines, references to the years apart, moments that could spiral into arguments about who'd been right, who'd been wrong, who'd suffered more. But Orion deserved parents who could coexist peacefully, who could sit in the same room without tension crackling in the air, who could make decisions together about bedtimes and vegetables and whether 5 was too young for a pet lizard. So they tried. They talked during Orion's nap times, when Evangeline could still convince him to take one. They talked after his bedtime, when he was safely asleep in his room, and they could speak freely without little ears listening. Really talked. About the hard things. Evangeline told him about the pregnancy in detail, about how terrifying it had been, facing it alone. About the neighbor who'd driven her to the hospital when labor started 3 weeks early. About the 48 hours of labor with only strangers for support. "I kept thinking you should be there," she admitted one evening. "Kept having to remind myself that you didn't know, that I'd made the choice to do this alone." Thatcher's hand tightened on his coffee mug. "Tell me about when he was born." So she did. Told him about Orion's first cry, loud and indignant, announcing his presence to the world. About how he'd been small, but healthy. About the overwhelming wave of love and terror that had hit her when they placed him on her chest. Thatcher told her about his marriage in detail she'd never asked for but needed to hear. About the hollow years of living with Juliet. Separate wings of the mansion, separate lives, coming together only for public appearances. About the guilt that ate at him constantly. Guilt for using Juliet. Guilt for failing Evangeline. Guilt for not being able to make any of it right. "I put private investigators on your trail," he said. 5 different firms over the years. They all came up empty. You'd vanished so completely it was like you'd never existed. That was the point. I know, and I understand why, but it nearly killed me, Evangeline, not knowing if you were okay, if the baby was okay, if you'd— He stopped, swallowed hard. If you'd even kept the pregnancy. She'd never considered that fear, that he might have wondered if she'd terminated it. I would never have done that, she said softly. I know that now, but for years I didn't know anything, just had this void where you used to be. They were sitting on her couch, the same couch that had been witness to so many moments over the past weeks. Their spot, somehow, where the hard conversations happened. I have a confession, Thatcher said suddenly. Evangeline looked at him. Okay. I put a tracker on your car, after the grocery store. She sat up straight. You what? I know. Thatcher ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from years ago when he was stressed. It was invasive and controlling and completely inappropriate, but I was terrified you'd run again, that I'd wake up one morning and you'd be gone, and I'd have to spend another 5 years searching. Evangeline wanted to be angry, should be angry. This was exactly the kind of behavior that demonstrated the power imbalance between them. Him with infinite resources, her with a 15-year-old car and a studio apartment. But she just felt tired. When did you disable it? Last week. I realized that if we're going to do this, co-parenting or whatever we're doing, it has to be built on trust, not surveillance. She studied his face. He looked genuinely ashamed, genuinely committed to doing better. No more secrets, she said firmly. If we're doing this, co-parenting or whatever, no more secrets, no trackers, no investigators, no finding things out about me without my knowledge. We talk like adults. Agreed? Agreed. No more secrets. She brought him tea, the ritual they'd developed over these weeks. Sat at the opposite end of the couch, far enough for space but close enough to talk. Your turn for a confession, she said. Thatcher thought for a moment, then set down his tea. I've been looking at houses in Boston, 3 bedrooms, near good schools. I told my assistant it was for investment purposes, but really— He trailed off. Really? Evangeline prompted, her heart starting to pound. Really, I was imagining a future where I got to be close to Orion, where maybe I'd have him on weekends, or joint custody, or— He stopped himself. I'm getting ahead of myself. Are you moving to Boston? The question came out smaller than she intended. Would that be okay? I can run the foundation from anywhere. We have satellite offices, video conferencing, all the technology we need. I don't want to be a weekend dad who flies in and out. I want to be present. For him. For— He stopped again. For? Evangeline's pulse was racing now. Thatcher set down his tea, turned to face her fully. The movement felt significant, deliberate. I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Can you do that? She nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. This was it. Whatever he was about to say would change everything. She could feel it in the air between them, in the way he was looking at her with those mismatched eyes that had haunted her dreams for 5 years. Okay, she whispered. I'm listening. I love you, Thatcher said. I never stopped loving you. Not during my marriage, not during the years you were gone, not now. The words hung in the air between them. You are the love of my life, Evangeline. The only woman I have ever truly loved. The only one I ever will love. He held up his hand when she started to speak. Please, let me finish. She closed her mouth, nodded. I know it's complicated. I know I hurt you, and you hurt me, and there are years of pain and mistakes and wrong choices between us. I know that just because I'm divorced doesn't mean you're obligated to give me another chance. You don't owe me anything. His voice was steady but raw, every word clearly chosen with care. But I need you to know that if you're willing, if you can find it in your heart to try again, I will spend the rest of my life making up for lost time. I will be the partner you deserved 5 years ago, the father Orion deserves, the man worthy of your love. He paused, took a shaky breath. I'm not just asking to co-parent, Evangeline. I'm asking for everything. The whole messy, beautiful, complicated everything. And you don't have to answer. Now, take all the time you need. Take months. Take years if that's what it takes. but I had to tell you, had to be honest about what I'm hoping for. Tears were streaming down Evangeline's face. Thatcher. Ah! She started, but her voice broke. Not just co-parenting, he continued. Not just friendship, but everything. Waking up together, building a life together, maybe giving Orion siblings someday if you want that, growing old together, all of it. The silence stretched between them. Evangeline couldn't speak, couldn't organize her thoughts into anything coherent. Finally she managed, "I'm scared." "So am I." "What if we try and it doesn't work? What if we just hurt each other again? What if Orion gets caught in the middle of our mess?" "Those are all valid fears," Thatcher said quietly. "I'm scared of all of them too." He shifted closer on the couch, not touching but near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "But I'm more scared of not trying, of looking back in 20 years and wondering what if, of watching you build a life without me and knowing I never even asked." Evangeline closed her eyes. "I love you too. God help me, I never stopped either. But love isn't enough, Thatcher. We proved that 5 years ago." "You're right." His voice was steady. "Love isn't enough." He took her hand gently, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. But love plus honesty, love plus commitment, love plus two people who have learned from their mistakes and are willing to fight for each other instead of making assumptions. His thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture achingly familiar. That might be enough. Evangeline opened her eyes, looked at their joined hands. His so much larger than hers, but holding hers like it was something precious and fragile. "I need time," she said. "I need to know this is real. That you're not going to wake up one day and resent us for derailing your perfect billionaire life. My perfect billionaire life was empty without you. And I need to know that Orion comes first, always, even before us, even before the foundation." "Done. What else?" The quickness of his agreement startled her, but she pressed on. "I need couples therapy, real therapy, with someone who specializes in blended families and complicated situations, someone who won't let us hide from the hard stuff. I'll find the best therapist in the country. And I need to keep working. I need my own money, my own identity. I'm not going to be some kept woman who gave up everything to be with you." "I would never ask you to be," Thatcher interrupted. "Your work matters. You matter. What you do at that hospital saves lives. I would never ask you to give that up." She studied his face, looking for any sign of doubt or manipulation, any indication that he was saying what she wanted to hear instead of what he truly felt. All she saw was love, desperate, honest, patient love. 6 months, she said. "What?" 6 months of dating, really dating, while we co-parent. No moving in together, no big declarations to Orion, no rushing into anything. Evangeline's voice was firmer now, more confident. She was setting boundaries, claiming her agency in this. "We do therapy, we spend time together as a family, and we figure out if this can actually work, if we can be partners and not just people who love each other but can't build a life together." Thatcher was nodding, following every word. "If at the end of 6 months we still feel the same way." She took a shaky breath. "We can talk about forever." Thatcher's smile could have lit up the entire city. 6 months. I can do 6 months. "And Thatcher?" She looked at him directly, needing him to hear this. "If you break my heart again, there's no third chance. For Orion's sake, we'll co-parent, but that's all. I won't survive losing you twice." The smile faded, replaced by something more serious, more committed. "I understand. And I won't. I promise you, Evangeline, I won't break your heart again. I'd rather die than hurt you that way." He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, to say no, to maintain the distance they'd been carefully preserving. She didn't pull away. When his lips met hers, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. Nothing like the desperate, grief-stricken kisses from 5 years ago. This was different, hopeful, like the beginning of something instead of the end. When they broke apart, Evangeline was crying again. But this time, they were good tears, the kind that came from hope instead of grief. from possibility instead of loss. "No more secrets," she whispered against his lips. "No more secrets," he echoed. They sat there for a long time, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. Not talking, just being, together in a way they hadn't been in 5 years. From Orion's room, they heard a small sound. Both immediately went still, listening. "Mummy?" Evangeline pulled away from Thatcher, wiped her eyes quickly. "Coming, baby." She found Orion sitting up in bed, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "I had a dream," he said. "You and Daddy T were both here, and we were all together, like a real family." Evangeline's heart clenched. "Come here, baby." She climbed into bed with him, pulling him close. A moment later, Thatcher appeared in the doorway. "Can I?" he asked quietly. She nodded. Thatcher squeezed onto Orion's small bed, and suddenly it was the three of them, cramped and awkward, but together. "Tell me about your dream," Evangeline said. "We had a house," Orion said, already drifting back to sleep, "with a yard and a dog. And my room had dinosaurs on the walls, and you were both there every morning. 6 months. Can they make it work? After everything they've been through, can love really be enough this time? Keep watching, because what happens next will warm your heart. And if you're rooting for them, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment. Do you believe in second chances? Have you ever gotten back together with someone after years apart? Let me know below. Thatcher kept his word. Within 2 weeks, he'd moved to Boston. He bought a beautiful brownstone in Evangeline's neighborhood, close enough that Orion could walk between the two places when he was older, but not so close it felt invasive, or like Thatcher was hovering. The house was perfect. 3 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, a small backyard that would be perfect for a kid. He'd hired a designer, but with specific instructions, make it feel like a home, not a showpiece. And he'd furnished 1 bedroom specifically for Orion, dinosaur bedding, bookshelves already filled with age-appropriate books, a telescope positioned by the window because Orion had mentioned once, just once, that he wanted to see the stars up close. When Evangeline saw it, she cried. "You didn't have to do all this," she said, standing in the doorway of Orion's room. "I wanted him to feel like this is his space, not just a guest room, but his room, somewhere he belongs." That word, belongs, hit her right in the chest. They started therapy with Dr. Naomi Chen the following week. She was exactly what they needed, a no-nonsense family therapist who specialized in blended families and complex situations. She didn't let them hide behind politeness or carefully worded explanations. In their first session, she made them each describe the past 5 years from their perspective. Really describe it. The loneliness, the fear, the anger, the grief. Evangeline sobbed and raged about the early years, about giving birth alone, about working double shifts while so sleep-deprived she could barely function, about the constant terror that she wouldn't be able to provide for Orion, that she'd fail him, that her choice to leave Thatcher had doomed them both. Thatcher broke down describing his marriage, the hollow years of living a lie, every public appearance with Juliet, feeling like a betrayal of what he'd had with Evangeline, the guilt that consumed him. Guilt for using Juliet, guilt for failing Evangeline, guilt for missing Orion's entire existence. Dr. Chen listened without judgment. Then she said something that shifted everything. "You both made choices that hurt the other, and you both did it out of love, which somehow makes it worse, because how do you be angry at someone for sacrificing themselves for you?" The question hung in the air. "You can't," Evangeline whispered. "Exactly. So you have to find a way to forgive, not the actions necessarily, but the people, to acknowledge that you both did the best you could with impossible circumstances." The sessions were messy. There were weeks when they made progress, talking through old hurts, finding new ways to communicate, building trust brick by careful brick. And there were weeks when they backslid, when old patterns reasserted themselves, when Evangeline would shut down instead of explaining what she needed, or when Thatcher would try to solve problems with money instead of listening. But slowly, painfully, they healed. They fell in love all over again. And this time, it was different, deeper, not built on the intensity of stolen moments and forbidden romance, but on the mundane reality of building a life together, on commitment instead of just passion. They learned each other again, the people they'd become during the years apart. Evangeline had grown tougher, more independent. She'd built a life through sheer force of will, and she wasn't willing to fold herself into someone else's world anymore. Needed to maintain her own identity, her own career, her own sense of self. Thatcher had grown humbler. The foundation work had changed him, showed him that legacy meant nothing if it came at the cost of the people you loved. That all the money and power in the world couldn't buy back lost time or heal broken hearts. Dr. Chen taught them to fight fair, to say, "I need space," instead of running. To ask, "What do you need from me?" instead of assuming, to take breaks when conversations got too heated, with the agreement to come back and finish them. Their first real fight happened in week 7. Thatcher had bought Orion an elaborate dinosaur set, the kind that cost hundreds of dollars, without consulting Evangeline first. "You can't just buy him whatever you want," she'd said, her voice tight. "You're going to spoil him, make him think money solves everything." "I'm trying to give him things I couldn't give him before," Thatcher shot back. "Is that so wrong?" "Yes, because you're buying his affection instead of earning it." The fight had escalated quickly. Thatcher accused her of being controlling. Evangeline accused him of using money to avoid doing the real work of parenting. Then Thatcher had said the thing he'd been thinking but never voiced. "You kept him from me for 5 years. Don't I get to make up for that?" The room went silent. Evangeline's face went white. "Is that what this is about? Keeping score?" And just like that, they were at the edge of the cliff. One more word, one more accusation, and they'd fall over into old patterns, into the kind of fight that destroyed instead of strengthening. Thatcher closed his eyes. "I need a break. Can we take a break?" They did, 20 minutes apart, both of them breathing, thinking, remembering what Dr. Chen had taught them. When they came back together, Thatcher spoke first. "I'm sorry. That was unfair and hurtful. I don't get to weaponize the past. We agreed to move forward. And I'm sorry for implying you're buying his love. I know you're not. She struggled for words. "I'm scared you're going to be the fun parent with all the resources, and I'm going to be the one who says no and enforces bedtimes." They talked it through, really talked. Found a compromise. They'd discuss any purchases over a certain amount beforehand. They'd present a united front on rules and discipline. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And through it all, Orion bloomed. Having both parents present, seeing them work together, laugh together, slowly rebuild trust, gave him a security he'd never had before. He started calling Thatcher Dad without the qualifier. Just Dad. Said it casually, like it had always been that way. Weekends at Thatcher's brownstone became routine. Orion would pack his little dinosaur backpack on Friday afternoons, chattering about what they'd do. Would they go to the science museum? Would they build that Lego set? Would they make pancakes for breakfast like last time? He'd come home Sunday evenings with stories about how he and Dad had cooked breakfast together and only burned the bacon a little bit, about building elaborate habitats for his dinosaurs in the backyard, about Dad reading 3 chapters of their book instead of just 1 because Orion had begged. Evangeline loved hearing these stories, loved seeing Orion so happy, so secure. But sometimes, late at night, the fear crept back in. What if Thatcher decided he wanted full custody? What if Orion eventually preferred living at the brownstone with the yard and the resources and all the things she couldn't provide? "Stop spiraling," Thatcher said one evening. They were on her couch, their spot. He could read her anxiety in the tension of her shoulders. "Talk to me." So she did, told him about the fears that kept her up at night. He listened, then took her hands. "I don't want full custody. I want partnership. I want Orion to have 2 homes where he feels loved and safe. And Evangeline, he loves you more than anything in this world. A backyard and a telescope can't compete with that." One evening, about 4 months into their 6-month agreement, Evangeline had a confession. They were on the couch again. His arm was around her shoulders. Her head rested on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Orion was asleep in his room, worn out from a day at the aquarium. "I think he's happier than I've ever seen him," she said quietly. Thatcher's hand stroked her hair. "So am I. Happier than I ever thought I'd be again. We're almost at 6 months. I know. I've been counting." She lifted her head to look at him. "And?" He shifted, so they were face to face. "And I'm more sure now than I was at the beginning. I want forever with you, Evangeline. Marriage, more kids if you want them, growing old together, all of it." Her heart raced. They'd talked around this, hinted at it, but never stated it so directly. "I want that too," she admitted. "But I need you to understand something. Anything. If we do this, if we really do this, I need equal partnership. Not you sweeping in to save us, not me feeling like I owe you something because you have more resources. Equal." "Done. What else?" She took a breath. "I want a prenup." Thatcher blinked. "What?" "A prenup," Evangeline repeated, sitting up fully now. "One that protects Orion's future, yes, but also one that makes clear my career and my autonomy are important. That I'm not just some woman who married rich and gave up her identity." "Evangeline, I would never—" "I know, but I need it anyway. For me." She held his gaze. "I never want to wonder if I'm staying because I love you or because I'm financially dependent on you. I need to know I could walk away if I needed to, even if I never do." He studied her face for a long moment. She could see him processing, understanding the deeper need beneath the practical request. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll get the best lawyers. Make sure everything is fair and clear and protects you and Orion. Whatever you need to feel secure." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you. Can I ask why this is so important to you?" She thought about it. "Because 5 years ago I felt powerless. I felt like all the power was in your hands, the money, the resources, the ability to make choices that would affect both our lives. I gave up my own agency because I thought it was the right thing to do. And now? Now I want to go into this as equals. I want to know that if I marry you, it's because I choose you every single day. Not because I'm trapped, not because I'm dependent, but because I genuinely want to build a life with you." Thatcher pulled her close and kissed her. It was different from the soft, tentative kisses they'd shared before. This one had promise in it, heat and hope, and the certainty that they were building towards something real. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "So, is that a yes?" he asked. "To forever?" "That's a yes to talking about forever. Let's get through the 6-month mark first. Then we can—" A crash from Orion's room cut her off. They both jumped up immediately, running to find Orion sitting up in bed, surrounded by books that had fallen from his shelf. "Sorry," he said, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "I was trying to reach the space book." Thatcher picked him up while Evangeline gathered the books. "Bad dream, buddy?" "No, I just wanted to show you something." Orion pointed at a page about constellations. "You can see Orion's belt in winter. Mummy says that's where my name comes from." Thatcher looked at Evangeline, who flushed. "I named him after the constellation," she admitted, "because even when I felt lost, I could look up and find Orion. It reminded me that some things are constant, that some lights never go out, no matter how dark it gets." Thatcher's eyes filled with tears. He carried Orion back to bed, tucking him in carefully. The little boy was already half asleep again, but fighting it. "Your mom gave you a perfect name," Thatcher said softly. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" Orion asked, then, with the casual certainty of a child who'd come to trust completely. "Both of you?" They squeezed onto Orion's small bed. It was ridiculous. 3 people on a bed meant for one small child. Orion was in the middle, already drowsing, while Evangeline and Thatcher lay on either side. "Tell me about the stars," Orion mumbled. So they did. Thatcher talked about constellations, about how ancient people had used them to navigate. Evangeline added stories about the mythology. Orion the hunter, the gods and heroes written in the sky. Orion's breathing evened out within minutes, deep and steady, the sleep of a child who felt completely safe. Evangeline and Thatcher stayed there for a while longer, neither wanting to move, to break the spell of this moment, their child between them, the 3 of them together in a way that felt inevitable. like this had always been meant to happen. Finally, they carefully extracted themselves, stood in the hallway outside Orion's room. The door cracked so they could hear if he needed them. Thatcher pulled Evangeline close. "I don't want to wait 6 months," he whispered. "What?" Evangeline pulled back to look at him. "I don't want to wait 6 months," Thatcher repeated. "I don't want to waste another second. I've wasted too much time already." His eyes were intense, mismatched and beautiful in the dim hallway light. "Marry me, for real this time. Not because of a will or an inheritance or anything except that you're my home. You and Orion. You're everything." Evangeline's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Thatcher, I love you. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to argue about whose turn it is to take Orion to school and whether we're having pizza or pasta for dinner. I want the boring, mundane, beautiful reality of building a life together." She put her hand over his mouth, gentle but firm. "Ask me again in 3 weeks, when the 6 months is officially up. Ask me properly." He kissed her palm, then moved her hand away. "I can do that, but I'm going to need a ring." "No." She shook her head. "I don't need diamonds. I don't need some elaborate proposal. I just need you. Present, honest, committed. That's all." "You have me," he said fiercely. "You've always had me. From the moment you brought me coffee in that hospital room 5 years ago, you've had me completely. Then ask me in 3 weeks. Do it right this time." He smiled. "Okay, 3 weeks. But Evangeline?" "Yeah?" "The answer better be yes." She kissed him, soft and certain. "It will be." 3 weeks later, Thatcher didn't propose with a flash mob or a billboard. He didn't rent out a restaurant or hire a photographer to capture every moment for social media. He didn't do any of the grand, ostentatious things his wealth could have easily bought. Instead, he took Evangeline and Orion to the Boston Public Garden on a Saturday afternoon in early autumn. The trees were just starting to turn, hints of gold and red among the green, that perfect in-between moment when summer was fading but fall hadn't fully arrived. The air was crisp but not cold, the kind of day that made you want to be outside. "Why are we here?" Evangeline asked as they walked along the path toward the bridge. She was suspicious, had been suspicious all morning when Thatcher had insisted they needed to go out, that it was important, that she should wear something nice but comfortable. "Because this is where you gave me hope again," Thatcher said simply. They stopped on the bridge, the same bridge where they'd had their first real conversation after the grocery store, where they'd screamed at each other and cried and finally, painfully, started to heal. Orion was chasing ducks near the water's edge, supervised by Marlowe. The older woman had become his favorite babysitter and Thatcher's co-conspirator in this plan. "Thatcher, what's going on?" Evangeline's voice was soft now, understanding starting to dawn. Thatcher took both her hands, facing her fully on the bridge. "6 months ago, I was terrified," he said. "Terrified you'd run again. Terrified I'd lost you forever. Terrified that I'd found my son only to watch you disappear with him and spend the rest of my life wondering what if." Evangeline's eyes were already filling with tears. "But you stayed, you fought. You gave me a chance I didn't deserve and probably hadn't earned. You let me into Orion's life, into your life, and you gave us the opportunity to rebuild what we'd lost. Thatcher, if this is what I think it is, Orion should be here." "He is," Thatcher said, smiling. "Turn around." She turned to see Orion running toward them, his little legs pumping, wild curls bouncing. He was holding something small and velvet in his hands, concentrating so hard on not dropping it that his tongue was poking out between his teeth. Marlowe followed at a distance, her face soft with emotion. "Mommy, Dad said I get to help," Orion announced, slightly breathless from running. Thatcher knelt down, bringing himself to Orion's level. "Thank you, buddy. You did perfect." He took the small velvet box from Orion's hands, then looked up at Evangeline. She was crying openly now, one hand over her mouth, the other reaching out to steady herself on the bridge railing. "Evangeline Rose-Laurent," Thatcher began, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to choke him. You are the bravest, most selfless, most extraordinary woman I have ever known." Orion stood beside him, watching with wide eyes, understanding that this was important even if he didn't fully grasp why. "You gave me the greatest gift," Thatcher gestured to Orion, who beamed. "And then you gave me a second chance I didn't think I'd ever get. A chance to be the partner you deserved, the father he deserved, the man I should have been from the beginning." People walking by on the bridge had started to notice. A few stopped, recognizing what was happening, smiling at the scene. "I know I can't give you back the years we lost," Thatcher continued. "I can't undo the pain or erase the loneliness or make up for every moment I wasn't there. But I can give you every year from now until forever. Every morning, every night, every mundane Tuesday, and every special occasion. I can give you all of me, completely, for as long as we both live." He opened the velvet box. Inside was a simple gold band with 3 small stones set in a row. An emerald, a topaz, a diamond. "Green and gold for Orion's eyes," Thatcher explained, his voice breaking. "The reminder that he's the center of everything we do. And a diamond for you, for the strength and clarity and unwavering light you've brought to my life." "Evangeline Rose Laurent," Thatcher said, looking up at her with those mismatched eyes that had haunted her dreams for 5 years. "Will you marry me?" Evangeline couldn't speak. She tried, opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just sobs. The good kind, the overwhelming kind. The kind that came from being so full of emotion there was no room left for language. So she did the only thing she could do. She nodded, frantically, desperately, holding out her shaking hand. Thatcher slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd somehow figured out her size, probably with Marlowe's help. Probably through some elaborate scheme she'd pieced together later. The small crowd that had gathered on the bridge burst into applause. "Does this mean you're getting married?" Orion asked, looking between his parents. "Yes, baby," Evangeline managed, her voice thick with tears. "Yes, we're getting married." "Does that mean Dad lives with us now?" Thatcher looked at Evangeline, asking silent permission even though they'd discussed this possibility countless times over the past weeks. She nodded, smiling through tears. "If you want him to." "Yes!" Orion threw his arms around both of them, nearly knocking Thatcher over. "We're a family. We're a real family." On the bridge where everything had started to heal, they held each other. All 3 of them, Evangeline, Thatcher, and Orion, tangled together in a hug that was awkward and perfect and full of promise. People were still clapping. Someone was taking photos. Marlowe was wiping her eyes with a tissue, but Evangeline barely noticed any of it. All she could feel was Thatcher's arms around her, solid and real. Orion's small body pressed between them, giggling with pure joy. The weight of the ring on her finger, simple and meaningful, and exactly right. "I love you," Thatcher whispered into her hair. "I love you so much." "I love you too," she whispered back. "I never stopped, not once." "Never again," Thatcher promised. "I'm never letting you go again." Orion pulled back slightly, looking up at both of them. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" The question was so perfectly, wonderfully normal that both adults laughed. "Yes," Evangeline said. "We can absolutely get ice cream." "Can Marlowe come?" "Of course I'm coming," Marlowe called from where she'd been giving them space. "Someone has to take photos for the wedding album." They walked off the bridge together, Orion between them, holding both their hands, swinging slightly with each step. Behind them, the autumn sun painted everything in gold. 3 months later, they married in the gardens of the Holay estate. It wasn't the grand society wedding the tabloids had been clamoring for. There were no 500 guests, no designer dress worth more than a car, no orchestra or champagne fountains or any of the ostentation that usually came with Holay family events. Instead, it was small and meaningful. 50 people, that was it. Close friends, family, the people who actually mattered. Evangeline's father flew in from Atlanta, crying the moment he saw his daughter in her wedding dress. Nurses from County General who'd covered her shifts when she was pregnant, and desperate. A few of Thatcher's actual friends, not business associates, but people who knew him as a person, not a name. And Marlowe, of course, sitting in the front row with a box of tissues, ready to cry at everything. The gardens had been Vivian's pride and joy. Evangeline had spent the past months continuing to restore them, and now they were in full autumn glory. Chrysanthemums in deep reds and oranges, ornamental grasses swaying in the breeze, trees ablaze with color. Orion was the ring-bearer, and he took the job with utmost seriousness. He wore a little suit that matched Thatcher's, his wild curls tamed for once with some kind of product Evangeline had fought to apply. He carried the rings on a pillow shaped like a dinosaur, Evangeline's one concession to letting Thatcher go big with the wedding details. Evangeline wore a simple ivory dress, no designer label, nothing ostentatious or covered in crystals, just a beautiful dress that felt like her, elegant and understated, and exactly right. She walked down the makeshift aisle with her father on one side and Orion on the other. Both the men in her life, both equally important, both holding her hands like she might float away if they let go. When Thatcher saw her, he broke down completely. Just stood there at the altar, Camden's son beside him as best man, having apologized profusely for his father's machinations and become a genuine friend, and cried, "You good, man?" The best man whispered, "I'm perfect," Thatcher managed, not taking his eyes off Evangeline. She was glowing. That's the only word for it. Her hair was down in loose waves, a simple crown of autumn flowers woven through it. Her face was radiant with happiness and certainty and love. She reached the altar, and her father placed her hand in Thatcher's. "Take care of my girl," he said gruffly. "With my life," Thatcher promised. Orion took his place in the front row, sitting between Marlowe and Evangeline's father, swinging his legs and watching with rapt attention. The ceremony was short. They'd written their own vows, wanting the words to be theirs alone. Evangeline went first, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Thatcher, 5 years ago I thought love meant sacrifice. I thought it meant walking away, giving up my own happiness for the greater good, protecting you from the burden of me and our child." She took a shaky breath. "I was wrong. Real love doesn't mean walking away. It means staying, even when it's hard. It means fighting for each other instead of against each other. It means choosing each other every single day, even when fear tells you to run." Thatcher was crying openly now, not bothering to hide it. "You taught me that. You showed me that second chances are real, that broken things can be healed, that faith is stronger than fear. You showed me that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments, but about showing up, every day, in all the small, unglamorous ways." She squeezed his hands. "So I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life, in sickness and health, in chaos and calm, in the mundane Tuesdays and the special occasions. I promise to be your partner, your equal, your home. I promise to love you and Orion with everything I am." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Thatcher had to take a moment to compose himself before he could speak. When he finally did, his voice was rough with emotion. "Evangeline, you and Orion saved my life. I don't mean that metaphorically or dramatically, I mean it literally. Before you, I was going through the motions, running a company, managing a foundation, fulfilling obligations, but I wasn't living." He looked at her like she was the only person in the world. "You gave me purpose, you gave me joy. You gave me a reason to be better, to do better, to fight for what really matters. And when I lost you, when I thought I'd lost you forever, I learned what real emptiness felt like." His voice cracked, but he pushed through. "So I promise to honor you, to listen to you even when I think I know better, to never let pride or fear or stubbornness come between us again. I promise to be the partner you deserve, equal in all things, making decisions together, building a life together." He glanced at Orion, who was watching with wide eyes. "I promise to be the father Orion deserves, to show up for school plays and soccer games and bedtime stories, to teach him that real strength is being vulnerable, that real courage is admitting when you're wrong, that real love is choosing someone every single day." He turned back to Evangeline. "I promise to love you, both of you, with everything I am, for as long as I live, and even that won't be long enough." "By the power vested in me," the officiant said, his own voice thick with emotion, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Thatcher cupped Evangeline's face like she was made of starlight and wishes, kissed her with 5 years of longing and a lifetime of promise, soft and deep and full of everything they'd survived to get to this moment. The garden erupted in applause and cheers. Orion made exaggerated gagging noises, which made everyone laugh and broke the intensity of the moment into something joyful and light. The reception was simple and perfect. Tables set up in the garden, strung with lights that would glow once the sun set. Food that was delicious but not fussy. Music that invited dancing but didn't overwhelm conversation. Orion immediately found the cake and tried to sneak a piece before dinner. Got caught by Marlowe, who promised him the first official slice if he waited. Thatcher and Evangeline had their first dance as husband and wife on the makeshift dance floor, surrounded by people who loved them. "I can't believe this is real," Evangeline whispered, her head on his shoulder. "Believe it," Thatcher whispered back. "This is our forever. This is our happily ever after, and I'm never letting you doubt it." She lifted her head to kiss him. "I love you, Thatcher Holloway." "I love you too, Evangeline Holloway. Always." 2 years later. "Dad, Nora spit up on me again." Thatcher looked up from the foundation report spread across the kitchen table. Orion stood in the doorway, now 7 years old and indignant, covered in baby spit-up. He was holding his 6-month-old sister at arm's length, like she was a bomb that might detonate at any moment. Nora, Eleonora Vivian Holloway, named for Evangeline's mother and Thatcher's grandmother, gurgled happily. She had Evangeline's wide, expressive eyes and Thatcher's skin tone, and she had the Holloway heterochromia, one green eye and one hazel, which had made Evangeline cry happy tears the first time she'd noticed. "Welcome to Big Brotherhood, buddy," Thatcher said, setting aside his work and coming to rescue his son. "Let me take her." He scooped Nora up, and she immediately grabbed a fistful of his shirt and drooled on his shoulder. "Your sister just loves you very much," Thatcher explained to Orion. "This is how babies show affection." "Gross," Orion declared, heading to his room to change. "Very gross," Thatcher agreed, smiling. Evangeline emerged from the bedroom a few minutes later, already in her scrubs. She had the night shift at Boston General tonight, which meant she needed to sleep during the day. The bags under her eyes testified to how little sleep she'd actually gotten. "Did I hear a spit-up emergency?" she asked, heading for the coffee pot. "Handled. Go sleep. I've got the kids. You have that foundation call at 10. "Which I'll take from here," Thatcher interrupted gently. "Evangeline, sleep, please. You worked a 12-hour shift last night." She looked like she might argue, but then Nora made a happy cooing sound, and Evangeline's resistance crumbled. "Okay, but wake me if you need anything." "I won't need anything. We'll be fine." She kissed him gratefully, tasting like coffee and exhaustion and home. Then she kissed Nora's forehead and went to find Orion to kiss him goodbye. After she disappeared into the bedroom, Thatcher got Orion cleaned up and settled him in the living room with a dinosaur documentary. The kid could watch the same documentaries on repeat and never get bored. Then he fed Nora, changed her, and joined his foundation board call with her sleeping contentedly on his chest. "Apologies for the casual attire, everyone," he said, as faces appeared on the video screen. "I'm on baby duty this morning." "We can reschedule if this is a bad time," one of the board members said. "No need. Let's talk about the new Boston expansion." This was his life now. Board calls with spit-up on his shirt. Nights interrupted by a teething baby who only wanted daddy at 2 in the morning. Weekends at dinosaur exhibits and children's museums instead of golf clubs and society functions. A house that was messy and loud and full of life instead of perfectly maintained and silent. Everything he'd never known he wanted. The foundation was thriving. They'd expanded to 3 more cities, helping 15,000 families now instead of 12,000. But Thatcher ran it differently than Vivian had. He worked from home more often than not, delegated better, trusted his team, because he'd learned what really mattered. It wasn't the empire or the legacy or the family name, it was the people you loved. The moments you showed up for, the bedtime stories and messy breakfasts and ordinary Tuesdays that made up a life. Orion wandered back in around noon, having changed his shirt 3 times because he couldn't decide which dinosaur was his favorite today. "Dad, can we go to the Science Museum this weekend?" "Absolutely. We'll make a whole day of it." "Can Mom come?" "If she's not working, we'll ask her when she wakes up." Orion nodded, satisfied, and went back to his documentary. That evening, after Evangeline had woken up, and before she left for her shift, they had dinner together. All 4 of them squeezed around the table in the kitchen of the brownstone. Orion told them everything he'd learned from his documentary, using his hands to demonstrate how an ankylosaurus defended itself. Nora sat in her high chair, smearing sweet potato all over her face and giggling. It was chaos. It was messy. It was perfect. After Evangeline left for work and the kids were in bed, Orion after 3 stories and Nora after 20 minutes of rocking, Thatcher found himself alone in the quiet house. He walked through the rooms, picking up the debris of family life. Dinosaur toys in the living room, baby blankets everywhere, dishes in the sink that he'd wash before bed. Their life was nothing like what he'd imagined when he was younger. Nothing like the perfectly curated existence his grandmother had probably envisioned for him. It was better, so much better. His phone buzzed. A text from Evangeline. "Just got to the hospital. Miss you already. Tell the kids I love them." He replied, "They know. They love you too. Be safe tonight. Always, love you. Love you more." Around 11, just as Thatcher was considering going to bed himself, Nora started fussing. He went to her nursery, picked her up from her crib. She wasn't fully awake, just restless, needing comfort. He settled into the rocking chair, the same one Evangeline had used when Orion was a baby, worn and comfortable and full of memories, and held his daughter close, started singing softly. A made-up lullaby about dinosaurs and stars that had no real melody but seemed to soothe her anyway. Nora's eyes drifted closed. Her breathing evened out. But Thatcher kept rocking, kept holding her, not quite ready to put her down yet. These moments were fleeting. He knew that now. Orion had gone from a baby to a 7-year-old in what felt like a blink. Soon Nora would be too big to rock to sleep, too independent to need him in quite this way. So he savored it, the weight of her in his arms, the trust she had that he would keep her safe, the simple, profound privilege of being her father. Eventually, he put her back in her crib, stood there for a moment watching her sleep, her small chest rising and falling, one tiny fist curled near her face. Then he went to check on Orion, who was sprawled across his bed in the boneless way only children could manage, one leg hanging off the side, dinosaur sheets tangled around him. Thatcher adjusted the blankets, moved Orion gently so he wouldn't fall out of bed, and stood there watching his son sleep too. He was still standing there when he heard the front door open. Evangeline's shift wasn't supposed to end until 7 in the morning. It was only midnight. He found her in the kitchen, looking exhausted and slightly frazzled. "What happened? Are you okay?" "They overstaffed tonight, so they sent me home early." She dropped her bag on the counter. "I'm not complaining. I'm exhausted." Thatcher wrapped his arms around her from behind as she started making tea, their ritual, even after all this time. "Tired?" he asked, even though he knew the answer. "Exhausted, but happy. You?" "Same. The best kind of tired." She turned in his arms to face him. "No regrets? About the chaos and the noise and the late nights?" It was a question she asked sometimes, usually when she was tired or worried or feeling insecure about whether this life, their life, was enough for him. "Not a single one," he said, meaning it completely. "You?" "Only that we lost 5 years." Her voice was soft, but then I think about where we are now, how we got here, and I wonder if we needed that time to grow up, to learn what really matters, to be ready for this. Thatcher kissed her forehead. "Maybe. Or maybe we were just 2 stubborn people who loved each other enough to find our way back. Both can be true." Nora started fussing again from the nursery. Both of them sighed, but Thatcher squeezed Evangeline's hand before letting go. "I've got her. You rest. We can tag team." "Babe, you just worked 6 hours on your feet. I've got this." Go take a bath or read or sleep." She looked at him with such love it made his chest ache. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" "Not in the last 3 hours." I was starting to worry. She laughed, swatted his arm playfully. "I love you, Thatcher Holloway." "I love you too, Evangeline Holloway, always." He went to get Nora, who'd worked herself into a proper cry by now. Hungry, he determined quickly, and settled into the living room with a bottle. Evangeline appeared a few minutes later with her tea, curling up on the couch beside him. "I thought you were going to rest," he said. "I am resting. This is resting." She laid her head on his shoulder, careful not to disturb Nora. "Watching my husband feed our daughter at 2 in the morning. This is my idea of perfect." They sat there in comfortable silence. Nora drinking her bottle, already starting to doze. The house quiet, except for the soft sounds of her eating and the occasional creak of old floorboards. "Do you ever think about what Vivienne would say?" Evangeline asked. "About all this?" Thatcher thought about it, about his grandmother, who'd set all of this in motion with her impossible will and her impossible conditions. "I think she'd be surprised," he said finally. "She wanted me to marry someone appropriate, have an heir, preserve the legacy, but she couldn't have imagined this. Us. How we got here." "Would she approve?" "I think." Thatcher looked down at Nora, whose eyes were closed now, the bottle forgotten. "I think she'd look at Orion, brilliant and kind and curious about everything, and at Nora," he smiled, "who has her eyes, and at the foundation expanding to help more families than she ever did, and at me actually happy instead of just dutiful, and I think she'd approve, even though I'm not from an established family. Especially because of that." Thatcher shifted to look at Evangeline. "She told you to choose love, remember? Maybe she knew all along that the path she was setting me on wasn't about marrying the right person from the right family. Maybe it was about learning what really mattered, about being willing to fight for it." Evangeline smiled. "That's a generous interpretation. Maybe, but I'd like to think she'd be happy, knowing that her great-grandchildren have both her eyes and your strength, that the Holloway name continues, but with more compassion and less obsession with bloodlines." He looked around the living room, toys scattered everywhere, his and Evangeline's lives thoroughly intertwined, evidence of family in every corner. "This is the legacy that matters, not the money or the name or who married whom, but love and showing up and choosing each other." Evangeline lifted her head to kiss him, soft and sweet, and full of everything they'd built together. "I'm glad we found our way back," she whispered. "Me too." Nora was fully asleep now, her small body relaxed and trusting in Thatcher's arms. He stood carefully and carried her back to the nursery, laid her in the crib, covered her with a soft blanket. When he returned to the living room, Evangeline had moved to the window, looking out at the street, lit by streetlights and the occasional passing car. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. How different everything could have been. How many ways this could have gone wrong. How lucky we are that it went right. "It wasn't luck, it was you, your courage, your willingness to give us another chance." She turned in his arms. "It was both of us, choosing each other, finally getting it right." They stood there in the quiet of their home, holding each other, while their children slept safely in their beds. They hadn't gotten their fairy tale 5 years ago, hadn't gotten the perfect love story with the happy ending that came easily, but they'd built something better, something real and messy, and earned through pain and sacrifice, and the daily choice to keep loving each other. They'd built a family, and they were living happily ever after, not in the fairy tale way, but in the way that actually mattered, one imperfect, beautiful day at a time. And that's the story of Thatcher and Evangeline, a love that survived impossible odds, terrible choices, and 5 years of separation. Because real love isn't perfect. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes it breaks. But if you're willing to fight for it, to choose it every single day, it can be stronger than anything. If this story touched you, please hit that like button. Subscribe for more incredible stories about love, loss, and second chances. And drop a comment. What did you think? Did they make the right choices? Would you have done things differently? Do you believe in second chances like this? I want to hear from you, your thoughts, your experiences, your own stories of love, found and lost and found again. Thank you so much for watching this journey with me, for caring about Thatcher and Evangeline and Orion and their complicated, beautiful path to happiness. I'll see you in the next one.